Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. It is Brendan and Brandon, and the NFL world keeps on moving. Doesn't matter what time of year it is, doesn't matter the month, doesn't matter the week, doesn't matter the day. Things are happening, and we got to talk about it. So I am joined, as I am every week, by Brandon. How you doing tonight?
Doing great, man. Gotten through free agency. We got the draft coming down the line. It's been a lot to, like you say, a lot to talk about, a lot to cover and turn over with this team. So it's been very interesting.
Right. So we got some interesting stuff to uncover tonight. We are going to dissect this quarterback class. It's a good class, all things considered. I would say it's more high profile than a lot of recent quarterback classes. There's a lot to say about this group, and I'm excited to try to pull it apart a little bit here on stream with you and see how you feel about these guys. So we're definitely going to do that tonight. But first, I think we should lead off with some housekeeping on some Seahawks moves because they were kind of busy over the last 7 days.
Indeed. They have remained active throughout this whole free agency period. They didn't start out hot, but they have continued to keep steady drip going.
Right. So just to step through these moves one by one, kind of going chronologically here. The first thing that happened was, I think, actually Friday last week. We anticipated this was probably going to happen. They tied the knot with Jerome Baker, the linebacker from the Miami Dolphins. We spoke about him a little bit last week because it looked like we were probably going to sign him. We needed a linebacker. He kind of fit. But any additional points to make about Jerome Baker and what he brings to the table here?
I think it's just a solid addition. He's obviously a real pure fit for this defense. The thing that I think stands out is it's sort of the thing that I gave him a little bit of a hard time for in my reaction to him video and trying to kind of explain a little bit about him is he's got kind of this sort of, it's not a laissez-faire attitude. It just looks like, certain players' body language style can look a certain way, but they're not that way. And he'll kind of look like a little bit like he's not exactly going 100 miles an hour or that he's fully engaged. He's not your Mike Singletary linebacker who's down squatted in his stance with eyeballs like this, you know what I mean? Where it's like, he's ready for what time of day it is. But at the same point in time, it kind of also helps him out a little bit, Brendan, because it's like he's able to kind of slow play when he's in a defense like he was before, where they're kind of doing different things. It's the Fangio defense he was in. Is that you don't really know what he's doing post snap because of his body language. He's not giving you any tells for where he's leaning towards. And going back and watching a lot of the tape, what sort of stood out to me is whether it was blitzing or whether he was spot dropping into coverage or going to take the running back in the flat, you really couldn't, as a quarterback, looking at him from the all-22 and kind of pick out exactly where he was going, what way prior to the snap because of that. So it does kind of work in his favor, oddly. But just something that sort of has stood out as I've been watching a little bit more tape on him. And he's not sensational. He's being paid for what he's been paid for what he's worth, but he's still solid. And he should be able to hold the water at the position, at least for the year and maybe into the future if he plays well.
Yeah. That's generally my evaluation as well. It seems like he's generally good at most things. I don't think he's great at anything. He did have that one year where he had like 7 sacks, which that's pretty notable for an inside linebacker. And he should have some chances to utilize that skill set with McDonald. But he seems like, he just seems like a pretty good all-around linebacker, the kind of guy that we need right now, because this is going to be all about balance, right? We don't want players that are really, really good in some areas, but really, really lacking in others. There needs to be some degree of being able to do it all in this defense. So I was mostly enthused. I'm a little bit worried about his weight. He's kind of right on the line. He's like 225, which is like just short of the area where it's like, okay, you need to move to safety or something.
It's been lowering too in years. So if we go back 20 years ago, I think for guys that are the Mike, the standard issue is that you're probably 245, I think or around the 240 range minimum. And it's just has slowly incrementally dropped over the years to where 225 to 230 can get it done now. And this is really, to me, the transition of the game away from being run heavy to pass heavy, and that the onus is now upon these linebackers that can cover. And so they need to be more able to run in space and more able to get to spots and zones and spots and coverages that the old school of linebackers couldn't with some of their, you're 245 and you're 15 pounds, 20 pounds heavier. You're just not going to get to a place that the other guy can get to at that spot, size for size, pound for pound. And so I think this is where the game's going, and this is a little bit of an acknowledgement of that. And you just mentioned, I think, the key here, which is that this defense, with every guy in the defense, and in a way to look at it to me in general terms, is every guy in the defense can be anywhere. it's not now about a segmented, it's like you're playing an old school video game, Brennan, and you can only do this move this way and that move that way and go backwards this way. But now you've got the whole joystick kind of thing. And Mike McDonald's whole defense is not as much about the onslaught of pressure that was his predecessor, Wink Martindale. It's more about the appearance of that, but then post snap, throwing everything at you that you could imagine and what you'll see and how it will unfurl and how unpredictably hard it will be to know who's going where post snap. And it's the ultimate, I think, benefit you provided defenders, Brendan, is if you can get an offense that's being forced to think after the ball has been hiked. Not before, but after you're making those, not everyone on that offense have to kind of think. You're making the offensive lineman think about protections, the quarterback think about where his initial read should have gone versus where it is going. Was that wrong? Holy hell, get back to your first read. They're flipping it this way. I think that it's a reason why I'm so hyped about this defense is I think it helps the players so very much. But you need the players who can get from point A to point B, who can get from, I need you here in the middle, and then I need you out way over here to the edge on this side. And the thing with him and the thing with Dodson, Brendan, is that both these guys can run.
Yeah, that's going to be the one of the big changes here. I think a lot of guys who can really move well. I think that John said earlier today that I think he said that Baker would be the Will. No, he would be the Mike, and that Dodson would be the Will, if I recall correctly. Which that kind of makes sense. That's kind of what we expected.
That's exactly what I said was going down on sign. So it's good to hear that that's confirmed.
1 year deal. Not sure I love that. I'd like to see some multi-year deals on these guys, but I understand that they're probably planning on drafting the guy that they really like, and they're just trying to get it together with what they can piece together now. So I don't know. I've mixed the, we've had the 1 year deal thing going on for quite some time now. And we've spoken about it at length before, how much the 1 year deals really suck the life out of your salary cap.
They do. I mean, it makes it harder. And I'm not, in the past, you and I both railed against it. It's kind of, there's two things this year that stand out to me that I've railed against, Brendan, that I'm not finding myself railing against this year, because I think we're just in a different situation this year than we've been prior, where it was much more about us feeling like we were getting closer, ready to contend, versus now it's, to me, truly kind of, it's not rebuilding. It's just more hitting a reset button on things. And I think that when these 1 year deals, when I look at that 2025 cap situation, Brendan, I don't know if you looked at it post the Leonard Williams signing and all of those deals that were added to it, the Noah Fant deal that was added to it at that point, but you were 24th. You were 24th in the NFL. And I don't think that there's anybody out there in Seahawks land that would advocate for us walking into the 2025 season and being 28th, 29th in cap space. I mean, to me, that would be a place where you get a lot of people kind of complaining, going, man, why are we so tied up against the cap? It's like, well, you gave out multi-year deals last year, and those multi-year deals flex up onto the cap this year. Granted, we got a lot of cap flexibility, so we can make some moves around in different spots. But at the end of the day, you're preserving a little bit of, I think, that 2025 situation. And that's also a little bit of at the head of what the strategy here was with these particular 1 year deals. In the past, you were doing the 1 year deals in Super Bowl go for it mode with Russell Wilson and the window's still open. And it's a little bit of a different lay of the land to me.
Right. So it is different, but the thing, and I thought the same thing about Dodson as well, actually. They're both young. They're both entering their prime. They're both sub 27 years old. And there's a good chance they're entering their best years. I would not have minded locking that up a little bit longer and giving yourself some flexibility. But you're right. There's a different attitude here.
What about the part, though, where you're not really sure if they're going to fit your defense, and giving guys like that a contract extension of his defense is so specific, the linebackers matter so much. What about that part of it too, where it's like, well, we want to get a view of them. And if the cost goes up and crazy next year and I don't know. I almost feel like I get the feeling too with that in tandem, Brendan, of there's sort of the way Coach Carroll saw cornerbacks, maybe a little bit of the way that Mike McDonald sees inside linebackers. We'll come to find out on that, but that he feels like he can kind of, I'm not calling him the linebacker whisperer, okay? But, he's got maybe an ability to feel like I don't need to necessarily go out there and put guys on big multi-year deals. But they also did that with Raekwon Smith. So I don't know. To be determined on that one.
Right. It's possible. It's interesting, though. And the thing is, I'm optimistic about especially Dodson. I'm optimistic about Dodson.
Oh, yeah. I'm even higher than him than Baker. You too? on that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So that's a guy I would not have minded locking up for multiple years because I feel like he's going to assert himself this year as a really good player.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see where you're coming from. So that was the first move. Second thing, and if you don't have much to say about this one, that's understandable because there may not be much to say. They signed a interior offensive lineman, primarily right guard, from the LA Rams, Tremaine Ankrum Jr.
I couldn't find much on it. I did a little bit of like looking around for some films in certain places, couldn't find much with it. The more I look at that situation with that, it's sort of let's fill some extra prospect bodies in here to add to guys like McClendon, Curtis, and stuff like that that are already on the roster. So a guy with a very low rate of probability of making the team. And I just didn't find a whole lot of information, quite frankly, on him either.
Yeah, he's used to winning. I'll tell you that. He won 2 national titles at Clemson, and then he won a Super Bowl with the Rams.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
He might have more championships than everyone else on the roster combined right now. I'm thinking about it. It's like we didn't get Jordan Fuller, so we didn't get that from the Rams. It's like he's probably the most experienced winner on this team. Pretty good, right?
Well, there you go. He's got that you need those Super Bowl winners who can guide those young guys through, Brendan, that, can show them the way. And yeah, just look at he's played about 100 snaps in 3 years.
Yeah.
And that, so he's just, it's one of those guys where you go, who knows on that one. Who knows?
Yeah. One thing I did notice when I looked at the scouting reports from the draft a few years ago, because he was actually a draft pick, he's good in space. He's good on the move, good at the second level, understands how to like keep his balance in space and hit a moving target. So that's like the second guy we've signed this offseason, an offensive lineman that isn't that good, but fits what we're probably going to need. So it's a sensible signing in that regard, I guess.
Well, a lot of these guys too, Brendan, can get into positions where, they may never get to that scheme that exactly fits their skill set to that. Like you say, like they should be best in a spread scheme, but find themselves more into stuff that's kind of traditional in the way that they're being used. And so they're not being put up to be allowed to be successful. And that's kind of what stands out to the spread scheme. It's a little bit like going back to the mid 90s Broncos when they were bringing out all those hyper mobile offensive linemen that were sub 300 pounds and then just moving them in space and cut blocking the hell out of everybody. And it was this whole way thing they were doing where it was like guys that other teams would throw out and be like, that doesn't matter to me. Who needs this guy? He's under 300 pounds. He's not big enough. And they're like, he's big enough for us. He can get out to the linebacker. And that's what matters to us in this blocking scheme. So one man's trash is another man's gold potentially with this type of scheme because of the preferences on what you want from your offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm. Right. But ideally, he doesn't make the team because we draft somebody like a Zach Sinter or draft somebody like Mahogany, or there are a couple other guys too who are even a little bit lower than that, like the Texas A&M guy that would have far more upside. Yeah, Layden Robinson. Yeah, much more upside at right guard than Ankrum.
Yeah, I would expect so. And at this point, I am anticipating it's going to be probably multiple interior offensive linemen in this draft.
If it isn't, I don't know what the plan is. I'm pretty confused about that.
John's taking a real hard left turn on those interior offensive linemen at that point.
Right. All right. So I think it was the next day. It might have been Sunday. We signed a safety. He presumes to be the backup safety to possibly both Julian Love and Rayshon Jenkins. Kayvon Wallace spent some time in Philly, spent some time in Arizona, spent some time in Tennessee. Only really been a full-time starter for 1 year, but is there anything that you have about Kayvon Wallace, one way or the other?
Oh, well, so he's drafted by Philly in the 4th round. He spends a few years in that Vic Fangio style of defense there. Doesn't seem like he ever really kind of finds his footing there with Philly. They let him go in free agency. Does not work in Arizona at all. Again, what's weird with that is that Gannon has familiarity with the kid, brings him to Arizona. So you think he knows what he's getting with them, but then Arizona moves off of him. Maybe it's just that they wanted a better way of going about it at that point, but they move off of him at that point to Tennessee. And then what's really stood out in watching first before I watched a little bit of tape on him to me, Brendan, was that there's such a difference between his grading structure between him with Arizona to with him with Tennessee last year. And not only was he best with Tennessee absolutely across the board in his level of play and how he was graded, but he was also graded out at the best of his career in that run that he had with Tennessee. So I went back and watched the tape and I go, well, what's Tennessee doing? And it's, cover 2 shell looks, a lot of dropping into cover 2 post snap, not a lot of going around the line of scrimmage or doing any of that type of stuff, just kind of typical free safety stuff, being pretty good and reactionary in coverage where stay on top. Oh, here comes the hook route. Here comes the in-cutting route. Jump on the in-cutting route as the ball arrives to be able to contest it with the receiver, where he just doesn't have that thing where, at times the cover 3 guy or the safety there, your cover 2 guy, where they'll stay up in depth, Brendan, but they don't get back on top of the undercutting routes. And they can walk the coach and they go, hey, I did my responsibility. And it's like, well, yeah, but you had the opportunity there to read it and know it wasn't going deep and that you could jump the route underneath there. And he will take the opportunity to do that. Probably why he was so well graded. But that was pretty much what I took from that and watching the Tennessee stuff. I didn't watch the Arizona stuff, just kind of locked in on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was he essentially replaced Byard when they traded him to Philly, right? If not in exact role, then he kind of got put into that starting job because it's a trickle down effect because of that.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%, 100%.
Right,
so kind of incestuous there. Byard goes to Philly goes to Arizona.
Yeah, looking at PFF, I think he had a pretty decent number of snaps in the box, but you're right, is mostly free safety stuff. So
he's got the familiarity. He's got that split safety familiarity. And that's with all these guys they brought in with the safety position here. And everybody in this defense has got the availability to fit purely into the scheme. They're not forcing any circles into round pegs with these additions. And it's a key part of that. It's where the game's going to, Brendan, and scouting these safeties in this draft and how many guys are asked to play in so many different positions on the defense and not just be, here's your spot on the defense, stand here. You'll be here every snap. You're going to be all over the place.
All right. And there was one more signing. I think it happened like half an hour after the Kayvon Wallace signing, actually. And this was one we talked about a little bit because it made sense because there was a connection with him and our new DC, Aiden Dirty. Jonathan Hankins, nose tackle, signs a deal that is, to my knowledge, completely unknown at this point in time. So he's been around a while. He's been in this league for about a decade now. Coming off one of his better years, though, in Dallas in 2023. So, yeah, Jonathan Hankins. We already spoke about him a pretty decent amount, but anything to add?
You're hoping you can get a little bit left of something out of the tank of him at this point. I do think he's kind of winding down as his career goes on. It wasn't that bad. Last year was necessarily a bad year, but I just think there's a definite feel of like, look, he's 10 years in, this thing's winding down. He's 30 going into his early 30s. Some of these defensive linemen can play to that age. That's for sure. Into being 33, 34 years old. And this is one, like with any move, Brendan, that happens with this coaching staff, be it a Dirty with a Dallas Cowboy player or Mike McDonald with a former Michigan or Raven player or Grubb with a Washington player. I'm going to trust coaches that are at a professional level and what they have at stake to where if they go to bat for one of these guys that they've played with before and said, hey, something worth grabbing, that's not just, empty smoke at that point, that there's a reliance I'd have on that because these guys have a skin in the fight on this. They have money on the game. They're not just simply having their former players back. They're bringing in a guy that their job's going to have to be relying upon for being successful. And so if he did go to bat like you think he did, then that's good enough for me. He gives you the third nose tackle. This is a very, very key signing in that point to me because you walk into this draft and you're thinking about needs, Brendan, and yes, guard is a place that you and I would both probably go, yeah, that's one we can't get around. But you look across the rest of the spectrum here and you set yourself up to where you fill the positions where you won't be driven to need. If I walk into this draft in that second round and I've got Tavondre Sweat or Junior Colson staring me down the face, right, Brendan, and I only have Jaron Reed and I only have Cam Young, there's going to be that pull, right? You can feel this, right? There's going to be that like, let's go to Tavondre. I mean, they're both really even. So let's just take the Tavondre. We already got Baker, right? You got Baker. So now you got the third nose tackle. You have Baker, and now it purely becomes a decision about value. Who is really the best guy on your board at that point? Not who you start to get pulled into and drawn into a little bit, but like who really truly is the guy that you're saying, no, that's my creme. That's the number one guy. Yeah, that's 1 and 2, but that guy's the 1, that guy's the 2. And if you go to the 1, I think that's where, to me, I know I harp on this, but that's to me the successful spot when you want to talk about how do teams draft great. That's how they draft great.
Yeah, and I think that was the goal this offseason. And for the most part, they've done a good job fulfilling that goal. There's still a very, very obvious need at left guard. Like we literally don't have one right now. if the season started today, our left guard would probably be
Nick Harris.
Nick Harris, and maybe Anthony Bradford would bump over, which I can't imagine anything we have on this team working very well. I'll put it that way. But other than that, they have kind of tied things up fairly well. I will give them that.
It's hard to get it all done across the board. It's hard to remember Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2 years ago were able to bring back, I think, all 22 starters on both sides of the ball. It's very hard to do that. It's hard to set yourself purely up in the draft to get for value, but you do it as hard, you do it as much as you can, right? As much as humanly possible, you do that so you can get yourself removed from that point of need. And I think John's pulled that off here with these contracts. And that's the thing that stands out to me that I like, on top of preserving 2025 season here, Brendan, setting yourself up in the draft to be able to really pick from that value point.
Right. So that basically catches us up to where we are now. We still don't have a lot of contract details. We know Baker was $7 million, but everyone else is unknown. We still don't know all the details on like George Fant's contract. But if you do the math and you apply heuristics, it's pretty clear we're probably basically out of money at this point, and we've kind of pushed it. At this point, I would expect that the team is going to find some creative ways to clear cap between now and the start of the season, including letting Darrell Taylor go. I don't think he makes the team at this point just as a financial thing more than an actual player thing. I just don't see how we can afford it. Same with John Radigan. I think he gets let go and maybe brought back on a minimum deal instead of the $3 million that he has, which that's not tenable at this point. And it wouldn't shock me if we also had to do a little bit of a restructure on somebody like Geno Smith or DK Metcalf just to slip under by enough to have that buffer. So I think we're pretty much tapped out here.
Agreed. I think they've probably, to your point on that, you set your roster up by certain moves where we're going to get this in the draft. We come out of the draft with those positions filled, but we had already signed the guys to those positions. Now we can push off some of those guys. Say nothing of maybe a potential trade in the draft where you're able to move back from here to here or move up from here to here, and then you include the player as part of your move up process to find a creative way to make that happen too.
Right. And you need a hedge in case you don't end up with an opportunity to get a guy at a position you like. Sam Howell was a great example of that, right? You trade for Sam Howell. Now you're not going to be pressured to draft a quarterback if the quarterback doesn't fall to you. But if he does, you can. I mean, you could flip Sam Howell this offseason. You could treat him like a baseball card and just flip him to another team. You could carry 3 quarterbacks. It's still available to you. But you can't go into the draft just thinking we have to draft a quarterback at some point. That's not a good mentality to have.
I think across the board, Brendan, it really is the road to ruin for NFL teams when they come to why their drafts go bad. And it's just as much as we've been facing here over the past 7 or 8 years, the 2 inverses at play. And John's told us that. It's not where you and I have to guess on this. This is what John Schneider's spoken about the last 2 years, is that we were doing this for about a 5-year period. Now we're doing this, and this is working really well. Okay. How do we get into that as much as possible? How do we keep that mentality at the forefront? And it's not just done by okay, we'll pick for value. It's also these moves that are made before time of arriving at the draft that allow you to then function the draft in that manner and way and keeping that lane. So I think that they've taken this approach. They've had the success they've had. I don't think they're leaving it anytime soon. And yeah, you're right about the quarterback, Brendan. And that could have been a big draw in this draft to where you end up picking a guy, much higher in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th roundish area than maybe you want to go, or a guy that you're not that sold on versus a really good quality player on the other side of that, where it comes down to that value point where it's well, we need the quarterback, but the values that guys up here, that's where you don't want to be down there taking that QB. As much as people want the QB of the future, you don't want to stretch that hard in that way, even in later rounds.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that basically captures it all. Evan Brown signed with the Cardinals, so he's gone. But once we signed Nick Harris, that was pretty obvious. And still could draft somebody, by the way. And Nick Harris has so little guaranteed. He doesn't have to be here this season. It's not a guarantee at all.
No, I agreed. I'm fine. Yeah, fine with that on that flip. I'll take that change over.
Right. So I think that catches us up. I think that's where we sit right now. And I think we're just ready to start opening things up on the draft for the first time this year. We're going to really dig deep into some of these prospects. So you ready to go?
Ooh, let's get it.
Okay. So today we are just going to be focusing on quarterbacks. And I understand that quarterback is not a position the Seahawks are overwhelmingly likely to hit in this draft at this point. But it's not impossible. I can definitely see a scenario where the Seahawks decide we like this quarterback too much. We got to take him while we can. We're going to carry 3 quarterbacks this year. Or they flip Sam Howell to another team. One of those two things could happen. And I don't want to rule anything out. I'm sure that if John Schneider sees the opportunity to get the quarterback of his dreams in this draft, he's not going to shy away because he has Sam Howell on his team. That's like saying I don't need that Mercedes because I have a Miata. It don't make no sense.
To your point, if I'm not mistaken, in 2012, you carried 3 quarterbacks that year. Was it not Matt Flynn, Tavares Jackson, and Russell Wilson? So Schneider has shown a willingness to do that once before. If that's the case, then why would he not do it once again? And I agree with you. I think that the quarterback is absolutely still in play in every single round of this draft at this point, Brendan. It is not merely just fourth, fifth round they'll be in. I think if there's one of these two guys, we'll be talking about in a second in our scenario here, talking about this that slides. Absolutely, one of them could pop up in that way. So I'm completely on board with it being a possibility here any of the way through, and we should certainly prepare for it.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. The screen's stopped.
Yeah, hold on 1 second here. I'll be right back. I don't know what the heck just happened. Be right back.
Okay. We'll keep this down here until Brendan arrives back in the flow here.
All right. Sorry about that.
There we go.
We're back.
No worries.
Okay. So, all right. So we're going to start at the top here. And I understand that this guy's almost certainly out of reach, but let's talk about him anyway. You can't talk about this draft without talking about this guy. Sense. It's like, I don't know. It's like talking about Star Wars movies and not talking about Empire. It's like you can't do it. You can't do it. So we're going to spend some time with Caleb Williams of USC, I would say at this point, clear-cut number 1 quarterback in this draft. 22 years old when the season starts. And by the way, all these ages are going to be when the season starts. So understand that they might be a little bit younger now, but we have some measurements from the combine, although he did very little at the combine, actually. He 6'1", 214 pounds, 32-inch arms, 9 3/4-inch hands. Every big board has him in the top 3. The database has him at number 1. The production's off the charts. You guys know all about Caleb Williams, but let's break him down. What is Caleb Williams bringing to the table here that makes him the number 1 quarterback in this draft?
Well, first and foremost, he is as good an improvisationer, a magician in the pocket as you'll find in this draft. In his ability to play off script and to essentially he can evade every defensive lineman on a given play and go find a guy 50 yards down the field. Then combine that with the fact that he's got very close to special arm talent. I don't think it's quite to the place of special. I don't think that he's quite to the place of being a generational prospect, but he's very close in these markers. And so you take a guy that puts those two things together, that ability to move around and be so escapable, on top of the fact that he has such a good arm and he can make every throw in the book, and he throws with accuracy and arm strength both. He checks a lot of different boxes you're looking for from in the position. Doesn't maybe have the size as far as pure 6'4" kind of guys that the NFL is looking for, 6'5" kind of guys. But at 6'1", he's still really soundly built. He isn't one of these guys like a Bryce Young type that came out last year, Brendan, that's at that sort of, he's 180 pounds soaking wet type. This guy is legitimate 215. He plays legitimately at 215. He's got a nice, strong lower half. His guy is Aaron Rodgers. That's the guy I looked up to. You can see a lot of Rodgers in his game and the way he can kind of flick it. And it's an effortless, his arm strength. Some of these guys have to really kind of get their base under him. They've got to get all off. He can get all off at any time, but fun player. What do you think on your things that stand out?
He's special. I mean, the thing that stands out is this pocket presence. He's like a Jedi back there, the way he just senses things, the way he moves around back there, the way he buys time and still makes a play. He doesn't drop his eyes when he's running around either. He's running around to throw. He's not running around to run. And that's something that a lot of these quarterbacks don't have. They drop their eyes when the pressure comes in. The red zone efficiency has been insane. I think he's got like 46 touchdowns and 1 interception in the red zone over the last 2 seasons combined, something like that. He's been on some not very good teams, by the way. Those USC teams, like the defenses were always bad. We know that. But the skill position stuff and the offensive line, that stuff was not great. He did not have he didn't exactly have his superstar wideouts and tight ends and running backs over there, did he?
No, he didn't. I think even especially this year, he's with what he lost the previous year. I think it was a better fit, for instance, with Jordan Addison, who was there the previous year, because he works off script. We saw this with Wilson over the years, right, Brendan? Where if you have an off script quarterback, you want for the receivers to be the guys that can then get into their secondary routes. So if you have guys that are more, I get open in my first 15 steps of my route, that's my game. Versus the guy who, okay, I might get open, but then I can quickly bounce into my second route and find myself, give my quarterback an opening as he's rolling out, looking down the football field. And so when he did lose that a little bit, a guy we'll be talking about in a few weeks, I'm sure, with Brendan Rice, the receiver in this draft, Jerry Rice's son, very good prospect in this draft, no doubt about it. But he is an on-script wide receiver. He's cut from the cloth of his father. I'm going to get open on the route, throw it on time and hit me. Not I'm going to get open on the route and then I'm going to break off and I got the quickness to go get into my secondary route. And so he, to your point, didn't definitely have the pass protection up front that was holding up, didn't have the defense, and then maybe not the receivers that would be as much, I think, the fit for what he brings to the table and the kind of guys you'd want to put around him to make him at his best.
Yeah, and there is some hero ball stuff in the way that he plays, but I don't really blame him for that. He's got a bad team around him. He's got to be the hero.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is something that you hope can be coached out of him.
Yeah.
That's one thing that you notice. Obviously, the big concern with him is his ability to play on script, but I don't know. I'm not that worried about it. And here's the thing: even if he never learns how to play on script, he'll still be a decent quarterback. There's a high floor here. I don't think, unless the personality and character issues blow up when he gets to the NFL, I don't think there's any way he's a bust. I think he might end up being a Kyler Murray in the worst case scenario, but I don't think there's a low floor here at all.
I 100% agree with you on that. And that's something that I think is trying to be brought up about him is that, oh, this guy's got a bust thing going on waiting to happen. And I just don't think that is the case. Like you say, I think his bottom level floor will allow him to play the position very well for what he can bring to it. Here's my comp with him. People want to say it's Patrick Mahomes minus 3 inches. And I don't think it's that. I think it's Russell Wilson plus 3 inches. That's what I think. And when Russell Wilson was young and he had the 4.5 speed and he was as escapable as he was in that pocket with that big arm that could throw down the field. And I just think they have the same innate kind of ability as the plays unfolding to be able to still be very dangerous in all ways in what they're doing back there. And that's my comp for him. So if you're getting like we had with Russell Wilson out the gate, like we saw, Russell had the high floor to begin with and what he brought to the table as a functional passer and what he could do. But like with Russ, part of my comp, like you mentioned, is can he play on time? Can he play on script? Can he get through the progression reads? Can he stay within the pocket? Can he do subtle climbing of the pocket rather than I'm going to back up 3 steps, spin pirouette backwards out of the back of the pocket, and because one sometimes is called for versus the other. And that's really where will be the key on him getting to the ceiling. But like you said, the floor is definitely there.
Right. How do you feel about his ability to go through progressions? Because it seems to me sometimes he gets a little stuck when he's going through it. He at least goes through reads. It's not like a Bo Nix situation where it's just one read and then go, but it seems like he gets stuck a little bit. That was one minor negative that I did pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a heavily pretty scripted offense with Lincoln Riley too on top of it. So there's not a lot of that stuff happening at times in between there where it's okay, here's a tunnel screen. Oh, okay, here's just a quick throw down underneath. And then, but it's definitely the bad habit stuff that adds up over time. Quarterback play, this happens. If you're getting hit a lot over time, you're eventually going to see ghosts, right? If your guys aren't getting open and you've got pass protection issues and every play feels like chaos, you're going to start scrambling on every other play rather than trusting the designs of the play and fitting into it. It's why it's so, I always say, very important with young quarterbacks to give them the stable environment because it builds good habits instead of bad habits. And I think of it like you, it's correctable. And as well as it's been bad habits that have kind of risen up because of the environment there at USC the past couple of years, in my opinion.
Right. So to me, he's a slam dunk number one overall pick in this draft. And I think the Bears are right to move off of Justin Fields to move to Caleb Williams.
I do. I think the guy we'll be talking about in a second here has just every bit as much of potential ceiling as he does. But I will admit that guy doesn't have, like you talked about a second ago, necessarily the floor associated either on that side of it.
Yeah. At worst, Caleb will be a guy who is great off script and bad on script. And you can have a decent career doing that. Like Russell Wilson had a really good career without ever getting that good at being on script. And I mean, I think that if you told somebody, hey, you're going to get Russell Wilson in with plus 3 inches for the next 10 years as a floor, maybe a slightly worse version of Russell Wilson, even, they would say, yeah, sign me up for that.
Yeah, 100%. People, I think, are a little caught up, Brendan, on whether or not he's this generational talent, but it's also just let's throw that away for a second and just look at what he truly could be or really is likely to be. It's like that's useful for NFL teams. That can work in this day and age. And that 3 extra inches is a big deal. That's 3 extra inches to get you a little bit up over the pocket to where you can see guys opening up over the middle versus not. We've got a history of guys at 6'1" that have been able to throw over the middle. Not a lot of a history of guys at 5'9.5", 5'10" throwing over the middle.
All right. So now we're going to bump along here to quarterback 2, also probably prospect number 2 in this draft as of this moment. We're talking about Drake Maye of the North Carolina Tar Heels. So this guy, 22 years old when the season starts, 6'4", 223 pounds, a little bit more of a prototype franchise quarterback than even Caleb, I would say, in terms of how he looks. 32 and a quarter inch arms, 9 and an eighth inch hands. Every big board has him in the top 10. The database has him number 2 overall. Good stats the last 2 years, although it should be noted there was heavy regression from 2022 to 2023 in almost all statistical categories. So Drake Maye, how you feeling about him at this point in time?
Prototype is a accurate way to describe Drake. He is a guy that I comp out to Matt Stafford as far as my outlook on him. A very big time arm that he brings into play. Good movement within the pocket. He's not a pure mobile guy, but he's got good mobility, especially an understanding of how to do the subtle pocket movements. He is definitely got a little bit more up and down on the film versus other prospects you might normally see picked number 2 overall. So that does speak to a little bit of maybe the dip from this prior year. But, he can bend the bullet style. That's where my Stafford comp comes really into, where there's times with Stafford where that hand comes off the back end of the ball and you sometimes feel like he's bending it almost around the defender a little bit in the way he can throw it with his control of it almost. And you get a little bit of that with this kid at times where he just puts the ball at times in places and spots that are just right on it to where the flashes of that show and you go, okay, I can see how this could come together with this kid and with this arm strength, this mobility, this size that he brings. There's very little I think that you can really pick much apart of in his game. Other than, again, just maybe not as much of a high-end ceiling to what he brought to the table this past year, but still not a bad year. And you still do see those flashes. There are explanations for it when you look at, like, okay, does North Carolina have a lot of great stock around him as far as supporting talent? The one wide receiver coming out in this draft, Tez Walker for UNC, was out half the year, I think, because he was suspended. And when he came back the other half of the year, his hands left him about half the time, carried on through into the Senior Bowl, quite frankly. And so that kind of adds into this puzzle, I think, just a little bit as well. But I just think when I watch his tape, I go, the path of guys that have come before him that have that kind of build, that the easy throwing motion, the good overall accuracy and the great power in his arm, they tended to fit out pretty well at the NFL. So you can project him a lot easier, I think, because of that too.
Also ran for over 1,100 yards over the last 2 seasons, which was not something I expected to see in his toolbox, but it does seem like that's a part of his game that is going to provide some value. Also uses his legs to buy time. He's not afraid of fitting a ball into a tight window, not afraid of throwing off platform. Also was a team captain for North Carolina. I don't think even Caleb was a team captain at USC, if I recall correctly. So that's something that I feel like is worth noting, because I feel like John Schneider, maybe even more than the average GM, values leadership in his quarterbacks and players in general.
Well, to your point on that, I think that John Schneider, if he had one quarterback in this class that he loved more than any other, I think that it would be Drake Maye. If he was picking number one overall, I think Drake would be his selection. So yeah, I agree. I think the leadership part is a big part of the puzzle of playing the quarterback position. And it's one that you cannot overlook at all when you look into this draft, especially if there's issues with a particular guy like a Johnny Manziel or a Jameis Winston type. It definitely should be factored in no matter how great the talent.
Right. Some of the issues that I wrote for Maye, where it seems like he's not that great pre-snap. Seems like you can confuse him a little bit pre-snap. He is a gunslinger, which is why he does turn the ball over more than a lot of these quarterbacks we're looking at. He's got 16 interceptions over the last 2 years, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's more than a lot of these guys we're going to be looking at here. Sometimes he just, like, the intermediate stuff, he just spikes it into the dirt almost. There were some accuracy issues. I think he had a couple games last year where he had a sub 50 completion percentage, and there are just some throws that should be simple throws, but they're just off. Like, he'll hit the back hip on a slant or something. The windup is a little bit longer than I'd like to see. It's a little bit of a longer release. So there are some things that need to be worked on. I feel like most of them can be fixed for whatever that's worth.
Mm-hmm.
But there are definitely more issues here. And I think the ultimate thing to take away here is that Maye, I feel like, has the potential to be EJ Manuel or somebody like a JP Lossman, somebody who just bottoms out and is just useless, just completely useless. So I don't see that with Caleb, but I see it with Maye. I think Maye could end up just completely washing out in a couple years because there are some problems that could really hold him back.
Definitely there's a bust factor there with him too. As I was saying with the thing we're talking about with Caleb though too, I think that there's potentially even in a guy like Drake Maye, a higher potentially even upside that you have in him that you would have in Caleb in the grand scheme of things. I'm not saying he's likely to hit that or that Caleb's not likely to hit his high upside, but in watching it with prospects, and I agree that the flash is there, the bad points there. You want to flush them and go, okay, but it's oftentimes these prospects about those moments they show you on tape to go, okay, I can build upon that. I see that. Oh, I can utilize that. I can utilize that. I can utilize that. And the bad's in there, but like you say, that's the job of the coaching staff to then clean up. It's the thing they ask for me if I'm trying to supply them this kind of quarterback is give me the tools, give me the raw goods to work with, and then we make the rest happen on our end, or we fail in it, and then it's on us. But I think he's got that work ethic, the leadership role he took there as the captain. He'll clean up what things need to be cleaned up there, and none of them are major issues to me at all. I think he is likely to hit that upside, and I really do like him. I think really, really fine quarterback in this class.
Yeah, so I definitely view him as a top 10 guy in this draft. I'm not sure if I view him as a top 5 guy personally. I think I could probably find 5 guys I like a little better in this draft, but he's definitely really, really good and a really, really valuable commodity.
He's my number 2, man. He's him and Caleb are my 1-2 in this draft. I think that he's going to be I acknowledge the bust factors potentially there with him. I wouldn't push back on that at all. I just don't think there's as much likelihood of him hitting the bust factor there either. I think he's going to be a good player. Landing spots definitely matter, but I believe in the Matt Stafford comp that I put on him. And just like there's a reason Matt Stafford was the number 1 overall pick in the draft, this kid going, if he was in last year's draft, would have been the number 1 overall selection for good reason.
Right. Do you feel like he can layer his throws? That's one thing that I found a little lacking. Everything was like a fastball. Everything was like a bullet pass for me. Did you see anything different when you looked at him?
You're right. And most of my notes that I'm reading up here, it's pretty much, it is pretty much that I don't see anything. I usually definitely throw in my notes that I've got the layering stuff I caught in there, and I'm not seeing those in there. I did feel like the motion was quick and quiet to me. So I wasn't as much with you on the elongated motion. I think it comes right up to his ear and it snaps out. And it comes out with good velocity, but that's a fair criticism, on the layered aspect of it, especially because there's a lot of QBs we'll talk about here coming up that do that really well in this draft.
All right, next up here, we have another top quarterback, and I have maintained for a while now that quarterbacks will probably go 1, 2, 3 in this draft because not only are the prospects good, but the need is there for these teams at the top of the draft. They need a quarterback. And if they don't, even if they didn't need a quarterback, I think there are teams that do need a quarterback that would trade up. So one way or the other, I think we're going 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks in this draft.
100%.
Mm-hmm. So our next guy here, Jaden Daniels of the LSU Tigers, did not do anything at the combine. They didn't even have his measurements. So as far as we know, he's 6'4", 210 pounds. I'd like to see that at his pro day just to be sure, because I'm pretty sure that's the number just that he had listed on the website at college.
He's eating burgers right now. He's eating burgers 24/7, Brendan. That's what's going on. He's trying to get that extra last minute poundage.
Yeah. So I'm a little suspicious, but I'm not so suspicious about his game. He's in the top 10 on every major big board except for PFF. They have him down at 22. I think they're just a little behind on that one. I don't know what's going on there. But on the database, he is number 3. So they do go 1, 2, 3 at quarterback. Last year was a monstrous breakout season. Absolutely inhuman production. 50 total touchdowns, almost 5,000 total yards, 4 picks, 72% completion. Absolutely off the charts production. Previous year was pretty good too, just pales in comparison. So Jaden Daniels, what does he bring into the table here in this class?
He's a hyper athletic quarterback for the position first before we begin with anything else. He has the closest quarterback that we have found in suddenness, stop and start, the open field jump cut move that Lamar Jackson does. These are the things that Jaden Daniels brings to the table as a player first, right out the gate with the mobility. He's comfortable moving around in the pocket behind and keeping his eyes down the field and extending plays. He doesn't just have to be a runner. He is also a really excellent runner with the football, just like Lamar in the open field, and just how quick he is. He goes 0 to 100. He is that Ferrari that just you tap the gas and it's up to full speed. Then he brings with that a real improvement this year. The thing you're looking for with prospects in their final year of college is them taking those steps forward. If he takes a step forward from sophomore to junior campaign, or he's gone from freshman to sophomore to junior, and he's been taking incremental steps forward as a player, getting better and better, it speaks to the fact that then as a pro, he's also likely to be working on his game, and that there's more of an opening there to think that he will improve as a pro too, that will continue to grow and grow because he's got that dedication. He's got that work ethic at that point. And with him, it was not just the fact that Brendan, he added 15 pounds from the prior year, which was desperately needed. We all saw him from the previous year, that moment with Jalen Carter, where Carter's picking him up like a little toddler and holding him around in his arms and raising up his number one. He needed to get himself a good 15 pounds first and foremost. So he walks into an offseason, but he didn't just stop there. He came back the next season. His processing was better in the pocket this past year. His arm strength was better. His accuracy was better all across the board. And so he earned that Heisman with just the numbers you just pointed out, but he also just did it with the eye test and how he played on the field. He can make every throw in the book. Arm strength is really good, really, really good. I don't know if it's NFL upper level plus, but it's a really good arm. We just talked about layering throws. One of maybe the better layerers of throwing the ball in this draft that you'll find. He's got 2 receivers in this draft that are going to be taken the first round, and they deserve to be, but also because he did a great job of putting ball location in the right place down the football field for them to go up there and make a play on those kind of throws. And that part really stood out to me with him as far as these throws, where he knows when he needs to lock it in and layer it. He knows when he needs to lock it in and let it actually rip down the field. And those 4 interceptions were not him just throwing dink and dunk spread concept stuff, Brendan. That was him letting it rip down the field at times, throwing ballsily into coverage where there wasn't always the biggest of windows in there to fit it. Him just trusting Brian Thomas or trusting Malik Neighbors to go make a play.
Right. And I think he's good pre-snap too. He's not just one of these quarterbacks who just goes out there and plays and wins physically. He throws with anticipation the way that Joe Burrow did when he was at LSU as well, I think. He keeps his eyes up when he's running around. He's not somebody who just tucks and runs as soon as the pressure gets there. He's got a ton of starting experience, 5 years as a starter. Now, the first 3 years were not great, but still you can see the progression to where he is now. So there's a lot of stuff to like about Jaden Daniels. And I do think like I said, I think he's going to go in the top 3. Now, my big alarm bell with him, I did have one alarm bell moment with Jaden Daniels when I was looking into him. He doesn't really use the middle of the field. Apparently, less than 9% of his throws went to the middle of the field at LSU last year. So he is, it's like the Russell Wilson thing. And obviously he was great without using the middle of the field. And you can be great without it, but with the way the league is moving now, that makes me not so happy, because I feel like the league has shifted to one where you really want to attack the middle of the field a lot. Is that something you think that he can learn, or is it just going to be part of his game that he doesn't use the middle of the field enough?
Well, I think the big issue with the middle of the field guys, as we've conventionally talked about them, is that they are guys that are undersized. Now, Russell Wilson didn't not use the field because he hated not using the field, middle of the field. He didn't use the middle of the field because he couldn't see over the middle of the field and he didn't want to throw a ball blind. Kyler Murray, same way. He doesn't want to throw a ball blind. He wants to see that the guy's open so he doesn't throw a pick. Understandable. There's nothing they can do about that, right? Russell can line up a yard and a half deeper in shotgun, but it's going to be tough. It just is. And, I've told you this stood out to me when I was in the stadium watching on a day we're playing Kyler Murray in the stadium, and I'm down there in the ground level. And you can see on snaps from the ground level as you're watching the game, those linemen get tall and they're blocking, and that quarterback disappear over the backs. And you can see how he can, when it's in those tackle boxes, he can't see him coming over the middle of the field. He cannot see him. Like there's places where I can see with Kyler, like there's no way he can see a guy anywhere in there, whether they're open or not. And then once the guy would break past the line of scrimmage and back into his zone of vision, he could see it. Well, Jaden Daniels is 6'4". He's got 7 inches on Kyler Murray, maybe 5, 6 inches on Russell. He's got the ability to see it. I also think that there's a little bit of this with like the grub thing that comes into play, talking about the Husky offense. In college, you have hash marks that are more spread out. And so what that means is that you essentially end up in just kind of layman's terms, you end up with a bunch of packing of the players to one side of the field here with a wide breadth of the field open to this side of you then, right? So there's going to always be that natural side of the field to go and hit the wide side of the field in college because the hash marks are spread out. When the hash marks shrink down, there's more of a necessity to now work the middle of the field because you don't have those spaces to the edges to work with, in my opinion on this. I mean, it's a developing concept, Brennan, but I've seen this on a few things showing up on the college level. And when you watch these college level offenses and spread, how much they run stuff to the wide side of the field, especially those tunnel screens and bubble screens, that they're trying to attack that space, that extra space that you get on the college field versus the pros. And I think that he's going to be able to make the adjustment at the pro level.
Yeah, if he can do that, then he's very close to a perfect prospect, really, as far as quarterback goes. Like if he is able to bring that, then I don't know if he should be generational, but what's the difference between him and Caleb at a certain point, right?
It's definitely right there with Caleb. Yeah, I think he's got a certain argument to be made. I think there's the other part that stands out to me in his game that I am worried about that's worth saying and that does got to be mentioned in taking him this high. Did you see the jackass crash test dummy Twitter post thing? Have you looked at that?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. So it's worth going and checking out after the stream. It's very, cause it's funny if much anything, but it also educates you a little bit on really bringing into clear perspective, Jaden, in this particular issue that comes out of his game, Brendan. Somebody took a cut up of his tape over the last year. And when he's out there scrambling around and he doesn't slide and he's listed 210, he looks like he's probably running about 200 pounds during the year and he's getting lit up. And then what they did is they took, remember the old show Jackass, or that song that they would play at the front of it. So they're playing the Jackass song over the top of him just getting absolutely, when I say he's getting obliterated, I'm underselling it. Like it looks like there's a couple times that you're like, do we need to get an ambulance on the field? Like now, does somebody need to get the paddles? Like he gets just monumentally creamed. And so I know it's a simple thing of they'll teach him how to slide, but as we've seen with certain players and certain guys, like we saw with Lamar through the early part of his career, where I thought he was kind of at times dodging bullets in his unwillingness to slide and try to act like, the guy's playing like he thinks he's a running back at 235. And it's like, dude, you're going to get crushed. And so he's got to learn, I think, to get down a little bit more from his side of it. But I'm with you on that. This is a really clean prospect and what he brings to the table. The mechanics are great. The arm strength is enough. The escapability is next level. He played in the SEC with the ball club. While you had the first round receivers out on the outside, I wouldn't offer that interior of that line was all that good of stuff that he was working with there, that he didn't have the greatest of lines in front of him. And he had to also deal with a lot of that real quick pressures at times and finding a creative way out around that. That's where we come back to those statistics he put up were legitimate, especially against the level of competition and considering the supporting cast he had. My comp form, by the way, is Randall Cunningham, minus the long delivery.
Mm. Yeah, and to your point, I don't think LSU has any highly touted offensive linemen in the draft this year. I'm looking right now just to be sure, but yeah, I'm not really seeing anything on LSU side. Charles Turner, I guess. That's it.
That's it. And they usually churn out at least 2 or 3 a draft, right?
Mhm. So, yeah, I like him a lot. The middle of the field thing alarms me, admittedly, but like you said, it's something that is probably fixable.
Mhm.
So, I definitely have him as the third QB in this class. I am thinking it's probably okay in the top 10. I'm not sure about the top 5 thing, kinda like I said with Drake May. I feel like I'm looking at somebody like a Bowers, I'm looking at somebody like a Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think I can get up to, 5 guys that I like more at least.
I think it's fair. I'd probably put Marvin Harrison Jr. in a number 3 spot, and then I would have Jaden Daniels as my number 4. The positional value's gotta factor into this, but the upside that you just talked about does as well. I mean, there's not a lot of clear things with him that stand out to me that say, "This is going to upend him. He's not going to reach his potential because of this, and it's unfixable." It's to me not that way at all. I worry a little bit about the build, but he's at least got the size, and I think he can still continue to add another 10, 15 pounds down the line, which is at that point, I'm fine with it. There's no worries about at all with it. And I think he's the ideal kind of design of quarterback you're looking for in this age with the mobility, but yet then still the size that he at least brings to be able to, see and make every throw in the game.
Right, so that's the funnest part of this quarterback class for sure, those 3 guys. That's a
Mhm.
great trifecta.
Oh
That
yeah.
is up there with any quarterback trifecta in a draft class that you will ever find.
Oh yeah.
Last time we had something like this was probably Luck, RG3, and Tannehill, I'd say.
Mhm. That's the closest we could come to, and I don't think there's been any other classes that even in that 3 that was taken, of course, that 2 of the 3 ended up sucking, but those guys like what Zach Wilson and Trey Lance did not have the pedigree of what you were getting with Drake May and Jane Daniels as the 2 and 3 in this particular draft. So I agree with you, and even it's got that beat, of course, even that one you mentioned. I don't know how far we'd have to go back to find a 3 stack that is this talented going in.
Right. So now we're going to move on to some guys who the Seahawks could actually draft in theory. Either by sitting at 16 or making a small trade up if they really wanted to, although I doubt that.
Mhm.
And honestly, with the way teams need quarterbacks right now, I think both this guy and the next guy are going to be gone by the time we pick. I definitely think they shouldn't be, but I think they will be because that's just what is being dictated by the narrative right now. Like this next guy in particular, the narrative is just driving him into that top 5 with alarming force. And
Yeah.
I don't totally understand where it comes from. I get a little bit of it, but JJ McCarthy, his ascent up these big boards has been absolutely nauseating. It's like a roller coaster that just keeps going up and up and up and up and up. And I fear that after he gets drafted, it's going to go straight back down. But anyway, let's talk about JJ McCarthy here. Let's try to figure this one out. 6'2" and a half, 219 pounds. So he's actually bigger than I thought he was going to be. I thought he was like a 6'1", 200-pound guy. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah.
He's got the 31 and 5/8 inch arms, which is nice, but he's got a little bit of baby hands going on there with the 9 inchers. Just a little bit, not a huge problem, but a problem.
Baby hands.
Yeah. Did a little bit at the combine, nothing too remarkable, nothing too stand out there. Every major big board that I use has them in the back half of the first, except for Walter Football. They have them in the second. But all of the smaller big boards recently have had him so high, he's been pushed up to the 10 spot on mock draft database. And there's a lot of buzz that he's going to go top 5, that he's going to go 6, that he's going to go 7. It doesn't seem like he's going to make it to us, but he certainly should, right? Like he should make it well. As far as I'm concerned, he should make it probably to our second pick down in the 3rd round.
Well, yes, to your that last part you just said. Yeah, I mean, with me doing this, Brendan, we've done this a couple of years now. That it's become a meme for me on my channel. That there's always one quarterback that pops up that I'm just sitting here scratching my head, going, I don't understand why I'm not getting it. It's like it's like having a zeitgeist. It's like when Avatar originally came out. There was an Avatar, and I'm like, Colors, 3D. You know, I'm a little bit like that every year with one quarterback in a draft, and that guy always invariably raises up higher and higher, and I just end up going more and more, getting angry and angrier because I'm like, how does this? Am I missing this badly? It's not as much that I'm angry that nobody agrees with me, just like, what am I missing about it? How am I missing this thing that's got everybody tuned into it? I've gone back multiple times on McCarthy, going back to last year and watching his tape from the prior year as I'd scouted him before this season. So well acquainted before he walked into what he was bringing to the table, who he was, how he was used to that Michigan offense. First off the gate, they didn't lean on him very hard. All these quarterbacks that we're going to talk about in this first round, Brendan, all of them, teams lead on him pretty hard. They needed this guy. And yeah, this guy's been a winner. But that's the thing that's been driving his market a little bit is like, well, he's a winner and he's going to be great in the locker room and he's just got that charisma and presence. And you're hearing about a lot of things that don't have to do exactly with how he, throws the football. He's not a bad thrower of the football, but I think that he is not as mobile as people are selling him as being. As you're hearing him talked about as a guy that you think the way people talk about him, Brendan, that he is a 4.5 kind of guy. He's not. He's not anywhere close to that. He's like a 4.7.5 guy. And he doesn't have the biggest arm. So he's not upwardly mobile, doesn't have the biggest arm. He's got okay size. That's where you lead with him out the gate. And I think that when you talked about the combine, that's where some of this did show up because you can do the whole radar drill, but that's so like piddly Annie. If I take a baseball player that throws 100 miles an hour and I put something that's 15 feet in front of him, and then I take a baseball player that throws 85 miles an hour and I put that's him, and the ball's going to come out at a certain pop at that point, right? It's about when it gets to the plate and at the speed of when it got to the plate. Much like with throwing the ball, you got some power in some short spaces versus when you got to throw it 30, 35, 40 yards down the field. That's where I need to understand where your power's at. Can you do an out route 15 yards down the field on the spot, on the dime with velocity? And when I watch him, I don't feel the power anywhere in any of his throws. When he's got to throw it deep, he throws it on a line. And then so when we got to the combine, you saw this on the deep throws, because what he was having to do on the deep throws is, I know it was probably ticking in his head that people were kind of wondering about his arm strength. And he's like, oh, I gotta let it throw. I gotta throw it big. I gotta let him see how far I can basically throw it. But for him to have to do that, then when you throw those deep balls as a quarterback to be accurate, you throw it high to let the receiver run underneath it, right? And when you have to try to get it as far as you can, you lower your line and you throw it more on that line, and then you end up putting it far out ahead. You don't have as much accuracy and control, right? You got to be more perfectly right on your accuracy of your throw of it rather than giving him that time to let him run under it. And when you watched him on his throws at the combine, the trajectory was different from the other quarterbacks, and he was having to put it out front. What was happening is that he was then throwing it out ahead of the receiver. He didn't complete those deep balls, I don't think at all, because he was just trying to show the arm strength and he couldn't accurately get it. And so I worry about these part of his game. Now, he does a good job at very small little times of processing on the field. He's the best quarterback in this class on third downs and third down and longs. This has been a big thing that I think a lot of other people are raising a little bit higher than I have on this, but this becomes like a big point for a lot of people looking at quarterbacks, I guess, as they're scouting, is how does he done in 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s? I think it's kind of important, but it seems to be being given extra weight with him in a way that I've never kind of heard with a prospect quite before, Brendan. He throws reasonably well off platform. He shows an ability to fit the ball into tight spots, but these are not things he's doing over and over and over and over again on film. It's like you see it a little here and you see it a little over here. So I don't get this one. I've got nowhere near a 1st, 2nd, 3rd round grade even on him. I'll admit I'm on my own on this, and I might be just missing it. We all have prospects that we just kind of miss on, and we just don't kind of see quite clearly. And I may very well be doing that here, but I've gone back so many times and just couldn't. I'm like, what am I missing? What is it?
Yeah, I have a 3rd round grade on him. I think that would be fine. I don't mind him in the 3rd round. But yeah, I'm not really understanding this either. I've seen people who are big fans of McCarthy, and what they typically say is some version of, it's not his fault his team was so stacked. It's not his fault he was almost never in high leverage situations. So there's some of that stuff going on. And then they say he's the best quarterback in this class on script, which I don't know. That feels like a low bar to clear to me. Like, I don't want to keep going back to the Brock Purdy thing, but Brock Purdy was really, really good on script, and he went in the 7th round. Now he's worked out great. Does that mean we should start valuing that as a commodity that overrides everything else that makes us take this guy in the top 5? I don't think so.
Yeah, well, it's like to be able to play on script, you need the pass protection, you need the smart offensive coach, you need the multiple playmakers that are all creating route separation every time they're going into routes. Like there's some other things that have to go into tandem with that if you're going to grab that kind of guy, and that's his skill set that he brings to the table. But we've had quarterbacks in Harbaugh's offense before, like an Andrew Luck at Stanford, who was not in a position, in my opinion, that was restricted in the way that McCarthy's been restricted here. Harbaugh was much more willing to let that guy go out there and open it up. So that, just simply to say, well, that's his Harbaugh's offenses, that's how he runs it. Well, didn't do that before when he had a really highly rated guy that was going to be taken in the first round, kind of utilize that guy. So it just doesn't add up to me. I think what more adds up to me is that we have a quarterback who's got a good skill set, but it's not necessarily the most complete all-around skill set all the way over here and up and down, and we can utilize it. So let's lean on the running game and have him featured as we need here and there, but he is kind of what he is at that point. And that's fine. I'm like you said, I think third round's fair. I'm probably being a little harsh on it, but third round's great. I see an Alex Smith type. That's my comp for him. And Alex Smith didn't have a bad career, but I just don't think you should. I don't think Alex Smith should have been taken number 1 overall like he was. And I don't think you should be taking JJ McCarthy inside the top 10. And to your point, Brendan, yes, I do believe right now, I was running through some proverbial scenarios. What I think happens here is I think Minnesota moves up to the Chargers at 5. And that's where you see McCarthy probably end up going. Or somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and if he gets past that, the Giants might take him too, I guess.
That's why they would that's why you're boom, because they're behind the Chargers, right? So Minnesota then, if they want McCarthy, they have to get up ahead of the Giants to go get him if they're going to snake that. So that's why I'm thinking that that's the way it plays down like that.
All right. So I had, let's see here. He's pretty good at reading zone defenses and finding the opening and attacking it. He did a lot of pro style stuff, like under center stuff in college, which a lot of these quarterbacks live in the gun. And I think that there's definitely a push to have these quarterbacks that are used to playing under center that draws people to them. But not much zip on the deep balls, limited value as a scrambler. I don't like his release that much. It seems like a little bit of a labored release to me.
Me too.
It's not
elongated. It just doesn't go snappy, right? Like it's not that it goes like this. It's just that it's what's coming out. There's a feeling of it just kind of, it will come quick. It will go up like this, but it's just, I don't know. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah, I think I agree with that. And it's not like, I know he's good on script, but he's not exactly a processor either, right? It's not like he's breaking down these defenses with, his brain and finding the open guy after making 3 or 4 different reads or anything like that, right?
Well, it's because it's like low passing volume attempts, and then he has a big number of volume attempts that are just those bubble screens or quick reads to the flat throws, just boom, pop passes, get it out of your hands, and then you're down to these amount of throws left. And then, there's a very few amount of those throws within that you're watching him really going through reads or doing things super smartly pre-snap to post-snap, in my opinion. I mean, there's some that try to say they see him doing a lot of like really great stuff pre-snap and what I just didn't see that as much myself, but it has been said, I suppose.
Long story short, this was a lot more fun when he was getting mocked in the 3rd round. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. We're in that supply and demand. And I think what's happened in this draft, Brendan, that's particularly difficult for teams that like us that are sitting at 16 thinking, where can we get our QB? Where can we get good value of our QB? This draft's just been an odd one. And I think the top of the draft, you have a lot of teams that are really quarterback hungry right now. You got a lot of sailors just getting to shore, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. In fact, there was a time where I thought there might be 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 15 picks. I don't think that's likely to happen now, but could easily be 5.
I still think it happens.
6. I mean, it's on the table. It's on
because you think of what in our scenario. Well, what I'm talking about here, at least in our scenario here, we've got 4 that have gone, and you may be differing with me on this, but if they trade up, you'd agree with me though. If Minnesota does move up to 5. Or I guess, it would be 5 at that point. Let's say Arizona takes Marvin Harrison at 3. So they go up to 5. They go up there and then they get, after we had 3 quarterbacks taken the first 3 picks, and then you have McCarthy taken at 5. Would you not think then at that point, there's going to be 2 quarterbacks taken between that spot and where we pick at 16?
Let me think here. I mean, it can't be Atlanta anymore because they got Cousins. That was the guy who I kind of had earmarked to take a quarterback potentially. Agreed. Denver's almost definitely taking a quarterback, I think.
Bingo.
And then the Raiders would think about it.
Bingo.
At least.
Bingo.
Yeah, I'm not convinced the Raiders do it, though, but they could.
I'm not convinced the Raiders do it either. We still do have the Giants there lurking too, as a team that very well may enter that fray as well. And then you have the other possibility being that a team trades up into one of those spots to go get one of these two QBs.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, and I'd support it. More quarterbacks come off the board before our pick means there's more stuff going on.
Yeah, all 6 of them, man. That just the chance of us getting a blue chipper dropping down into our lap at that point raises so much more favorably.
All right, so that's JJ McCarthy. Now we're moving on here to another guy that I don't really get. I think I get him a little more than McCarthy, but the problems I have are also very different. It's Bo Nix of the Oregon Ducks. Going to be 24 when the season starts. 6'2", 214 pounds, so he's smaller and shorter than McCarthy, which does not feel right.
Doesn't process.
I watched football last year, and I swear Bo Nix was much bigger than McCarthy, and yet they get measured out, and it's what do you know, right?
He looks 225 easy. He looks 225. I mean, he's well built out there, so I don't know. Wild.
31 and 7/8 inch arms, nice big hands, 10 and an eighth. Big boards mostly have him in the second round. In fact, all the major big boards have him at some point in the second. But the smaller mocks have started to really push him to Denver. So they're putting him up at 12, which has actually bumped his database ranking to 31. So by the skin of his teeth, he is considered a first-round pick, and I actually think he is going to go much higher than that. I do think him going to Denver makes a lot of sense. I do think that him going in that top 15 makes a lot of sense. Crazy good production the last 2 years. Last year, 4,500 yards, ran for 230, 45 touchdowns, 77 completion percentage. So I can't knock the production, but I'm a little concerned about this player. What do you think, though?
I'm actually kind of higher up on him. I look at him as kind of like a more accurate version of Justin Fields. I think that there's some things I think that I worry about, like you've worried about with him, on just it's really the simplicity nature of that offense and what it has him do at times. And, he's been called at times a check down merchant. But 77% is 77%. And there are a lot of other big time throws on his tape where he's letting it rip down the field. I think he's got a nice delivery myself. I think the ball comes out of his hands with some kind of underrated velocity. He's not given, I think, as much credit for how strong his arm truly is. And the accuracy shows that he puts it in the right spot. Yes, there are those check down throws, but there are those throws down that field. I mean, he's got a receiver with 1,300 yards on the season, and a receiver that he's in this draft that I've got some questions on too. He's got some lack of feel out there that sometimes bothers me a little bit for what he brings. But I think he can make all the throws in the book. He's got the mobility, that Taysom Hill mobility we've talked about, that you combine that with the Denver fit feels really right for me, because he has a lot of being able to play on script with just hitting the checkdowns, Brendan, but also being able to hit the deep throws on the scripted stuff, where you can feel the quarterback, the coach telling him, okay, look to the right, move the safety off with your eyes, give me a 1,000, and then come back to the backside throw on the 9 route. And he's got that nice internal timing clock of how he runs it and sets the play up and doesn't rush it through too much. He plays under control. He's a calm, cool customer in the pocket, and how he plays. He's not rushed or anything like that. There is at times when he's moving around, the accuracy can sometimes dip a little bit versus on. It's not bad necessarily, but there's maybe a little bit of a dip to him with that when he does have to move a little bit. But I do like him. I think I don't think he's a pure processor on the field. Processing is a big part of it. But when you have a guy that's got a good enough size, the mobility, get you those yards if in a pinch, you're talking about getting a rookie quarterback that you can maximize and who's ready to hit the ground running, Brendan. 54 starts in his college career, I believe, 54, something like that, 50 something. So right. He's got a long track record, so that you're not having to sit this guy for a year. You bring him in, he should be able to play. And you mentioned Denver. I mean, you talk about a guy like Peyton, whose man's like, I want a quarterback in here who's not doing this damn improvisation. Run my system. You know what I mean? Like, do it the way I tell you. Well, Exhibit A, Your Honor. Here's the guy who will do just what you tell him to go do in a good way, not a bad way. So
Mhm.
I think he's a first round quarterback at this point. I had a second round grade on him for a long time, but going back and watching him again, Brennan, I think that just that triple combo, you got the size, you got the arm strength, you got the mobility, you got the accuracy, and you started for all those years in college. Like, there's times that we can't overthink it too much. I think, he may not have that upside of some of these guys we talked about in this first round, the sparkling upside, but there's something there to work with and work with immediately.
Yeah, I think that the Bo Nix happy path would be he's Jalen Hurts. He could be like Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts went to a great team that surrounded him with great stuff, and he's looked really good. But I don't think Jalen Hurts is all that. I think, he's got some positive attributes, but I think that he benefits tremendously from his situation. And I think Bo Nix could be like that. He does have the big arm, like you said. He throws with velocity, a lot of experience. He's good pre-snap, by the way. He's not good post-snap because he's never asked to do those things, but his pre-snap stuff feeds into how he makes such easy decisions post-snap. I do like that. At the college level, he had speed, he had power, he had athleticism. Like, he runs with all those things. Quick release as well. I think he actually gets the ball out very quickly once he starts to throw it. Which I was a little bit worried about when I started looking at him. It's just that whole thing about processing, and it's that whole idea of him not really doing much of anything when he was at Auburn. He only became a prolific player after he went to Oregon.
True.
30% of his passes are behind the line of scrimmage, which was the most in college football last year, which is going to be a little bit of an alarm bell to me. I'm also suspicious of how much that mobility will translate to the NFL. We've talked about this before. If he runs a 4.5, that's really interesting. But if he runs like a 4.7, 4.8, then it kind of turns into the Baker Mayfield situation where that stuff is not going to work at the pro level. So the fact that he didn't run the 40 at the combine had me a little bit like, what's he hiding here?
I'm with you. That's going to be one of those numbers you're going to look very closely to, because the mobility side of it being in that sort of Taysom Hill place, which is more, you're somewhere between 4.5 and 4.6. But if you're in the 4.7 place at that point, you're right. It lessens down this point of it, because I don't think he's going to do as much stuff like a guy like Renard, but for instance, with Penix and what he does in the pocket and process and going through, like, he's not going to give you that to his game necessarily. And so we keep coming back. The fit between Peyton, a guy that's going to be basically have him instructed on keynotes of every week, here's what you're doing here, here's what you're doing there. And the marriage that we saw once between a Peyton and a Drew Brees type, I think you could see a similar, very good fit there between these two guys. And so, but I like him for what he brings. I think Hurts is fair. I think he does have more arm strength than Hurts. I think he's more accurate than Hurts on those two fronts. I think those would be two spots with Hurts. A little bit more of the athlete at the position purely, I think. Not a bad thrower of the ball, just not necessarily a pure natural thrower. Not that he's a pure natural, but you know what I mean? Just not with Hurts, it's a little bit sometimes herky-jerky back there on his throwing motion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So as of right now, I think he's a third rounder. I would bump him up to second rounder if he runs like a 4.55 or something, and we actually see the speed translate to an objective measure. So not a big fan, but I do think he will go in the top 15, and I kind of get it because teams just need quarterbacks right now.
There's enough of them that do, that's for sure. And there wasn't enough available this offseason to go getting him out there on the open market.
All right, so that is Bo Nix. Real quick here, we got a dono from Kevin Mullen. Thank you for the $1.99 petition to change the show name to Between Two Fans. Wouldn't we run into like legal trouble?
we might. we'd have to have two transparent images of a Fant on either side of us, though. Then too, as we're running the show, we're gonna make that work.
Yeah, not a lot of room on screen right now. It's so dense. Every single frame is just filled with so much important stuff on this show that we don't have the frames to spare.
Exactly. Just can't fill in this. That'd be too much fan action.
All right, so we have one more guy who I would consider to be of the exciting group in this draft, right? It's like the big six. Like, I think the 1983 quarterback draft had 6 quarterbacks that were considered like upper echelon prospects. The Elway, Marino, Ken O'Brien. I can't remember all of them now, but I think there were 6 guys in
Oh
totality.
yeah, man. There's one for the Jets. Yeah, you're right though. There were 6 that
Yeah.
went that year.
I think Ken O'Brien was the Jets guy.
Ken O'Brien,
right?
that's the guy. Yeah, that was the Jets guy. I was trying to, let me look at that. 98 first round quarterback. I want to
Yes.
look it up because keep talking though. Boomer aside,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was the other one.
Boomer. There we go.
So you had
Yeah. Elway was the number one. Marino fell because of his Wonderlic score.
well, and they thought he was doing the cocaine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
That was
then
the
you had
other.
Ken O'Brien, Boomer Esiason. I think there were two more
Jim
that went.
Kelly and Todd
Jim Kelly.
Blackledge.
Oh yeah, Blackledge. There we go. Easy to forget that one, unfortunately.
So we got 3 Hall of Famers in there, 2 Hall of Famers in there. Well, Elway, Kelly, and Marino, 3 Hall of Famers out of that group. So
Yeah, and Esiason's like one of the best quarterbacks to not be in the Hall of Fame.
yeah, he is. Bengals are kind of known for that. They got that in Ken Candlelight Anderson, one of my favorite nickname of all time, and because one blow and he's out. I love that. Such a cruel name to give to a quarterback. Oh, it's brutal. But yeah, Boomer was great with that sort of K-gun offense. Sam Weish, hurry up, Icky Wood shuffle time, all that. But if we'd be lucky, we come out of this draft with 3 Hall of Famers. We might still and look, this guy we're going to talk about right here, Brendan. The last of that group that went in that draft was who?
The last guy, wasn't it Marino?
It was Dan Marino.
Yeah.
And if I was to ask you, Brendan, of these first round quarterbacks, who is the one that is most like Dan Marino of these proverbial first round quarterbacks? Which guy might you say?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. There's a lot in common here. I think that, yeah, if you were to draw that comp, Michael Penix Jr. would be that guy. Right down to some of the negatives as well as the positives, don't get me wrong, but
exactly,
there's some stuff here that's really appealing. So obviously Washington Huskies going to be 24 when the season starts. And by the way, real quick to talk about that age thing, I think that's become really overblown, age, when you're looking at quarterbacks in particular. Because first of all, you're kind of going to get the same miles out of the quarterback, I feel like, at the end of the day, no matter how old they are. So, like, to me, the difference between a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old, I think maybe we make a little bit too much of a big deal out of that. Once you get down to like a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old like Anthony Richardson, that's different because it means they're not done growing yet. They still can improve on a very fundamental level in a way that a 22-year-old won't. But when it comes to a guy like Penix and people talking about the age, I do think that's kind of gotten to be too big of a deal to some evaluators.
I would agree with that. I think the quarterback position is a separate one from other positions on the field in the view of that, because of the fact that so much of it's cerebral and it's such a hard position to play. So it takes longer to master. And so the other thing that I would say in addition to this point you just made out of is that let's also build into the understanding of this, that these dumb NFL teams cannot help themselves as far as having patience with these quarterbacks and giving them time to mature and sit on the bench a little bit. Everybody is, chomping at the bit and pushing to get these guys pushed out onto the forefront. How much of the Packers' success with Rodgers and now maybe with Love is going to have to do, when we look in retrospect, the time that you gave them on the bench to learn. And they didn't step out on the field then at 22 years old. They didn't step out on the field at 23 years old. And so it's really about getting that guy to that developmental point. And if the understanding is that doesn't happen at 23, doesn't happen at 22, then yeah, I agree with you. The guy being a little bit older is not a death knell for him and shouldn't be looked at. And especially in this day and age when quarterbacks aren't staying with teams for 10 years, they're not just staying with the drafted team and like, well, they're there for the next 10. Like you might only get the 4 or 5. So what difference does it make if it's the 4 or 5 at 23 to 26 or this, especially if the guy means he's more ready at the position to go, like Penix is.
So 6'2", 216 pounds, 33 and 5/8 inch arms. He's got the longest arms of any quarterback in this draft, I'm pretty sure. And I don't think it's close. I think he's got a good half inch on everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got that wingspan. He's got big hands, 10.5 inches, monstrously big hands. And the big boards, couple have him in the first, couple have him in the second. ESPN has him in the 4th. They're kind of an outlier here. I don't know where they're thinking that's going to happen. That's not going to happen. But the mock draft database has him just outside the first round. They have him at 37. So as of right now, they think he's a second rounder. For the reasons we've discussed throughout this show, I kind of expect him to go in the first because some team is going to be like, we need a quarterback, and he's the quarterback. Ton of production over the last 2 years, close to 10,000 yards and 70 touchdowns, 65% completion, 19 interceptions. So the numbers are there. The numbers are there just like they are with a guy like Nix or Daniels. So Michael Penix, what do you see with him at the next level?
Unique quarterback in this class, and a unique quarterback that's come out in recent years that makes it very hard for him to be evaluated. It's not an easy one to walk into this and go, okay, I got it. This is this. And the detriments that work against him, from the injury situation to early on in his college career to some of the age, I get completely. But what he is maybe the best pure passer of the football in this entire class. When it comes to the guys sitting up, lining up in that back there and letting it rip, there may be not a better ripper than Michael Penix in this class. You mentioned his hands. It's like he's grabbing a Nerf ball when he's throwing it. And if anybody's ever had one of those smaller Nerf balls, you understand that I give you a Nerf ball or I give you a regulation NFL football, there's a little bit of a difference in how it feels in your hand and how much control you feel like you have over it, and what you can do with that little Nerf versus the bigger ball. And it's why, again, hand size can kind of matter on that, because it gives you that little bit of extra control. He's a lefty. It looks a little bit odd when he throws it. He's got a little bit of, at times, that Drew Brees-like release that'll seemingly kind of come from a 3/4 delivery spot of things. But the ball comes out with as good of arm strength as you'll find in this class. He throws with anticipation. There are times with him on tape where you're seeing him process on the field and do full feel reads. He is a guy that it was clicking in with me on the Marino deal, where I was watching a documentary of Marino about a week and a half ago. And just when there were guys talking about Marino coming out of college in Pittsburgh, and just what was standing out about Marino at that time to the evaluators, and what you liked about him. And you could see with Marino, I mean, you can even go watch Marino's arm talent now back at Pitt and go, oh, wow, that guy's got for even being 1983, like that arm's got a little bit of something to it. And you can see that with this thing with Penix too, where there's some arm talent, but just their ability to stand in the pocket and let it rip with precision, with ballsiness, with I don't care, with a swagger to it back there. He will supply that from that standpoint of things. So very impressive, first on the foremost on that. Now, there are some problems with Penix too that go beyond just the front side, the age, the injury factor. When you ask him to move and roll out, scramble, the accuracy can have a tendency to dip. It can tend to sail on him. Or he'll dirt it. He just is not as on it when you have him to start to move and have to get outside of the pocket. He does show really good pocket mobility and movement with the subtle movements, the climbing the ladder, a move to the left where he can be snappy in short spaces. He went over 19 miles an hour at the Senior Bowl, so he's not a guy that's immobile. He is not a guy that's a 4-5 guy, but he's not a guy that's going to be just a standing still statue back there either. And especially compared to Marino, he's Michael Vick compared to Marino on that side of things. My comp for him is Drew Brees. I think he's Drew Brees with better arm strength. Both guys came from a spread system coming out. Brees, I think it was at Purdue at the time. And I think that Michael's got a little more of the juice, the arm strength, a little more size, which is why I think he will be taken in the first round. And I do expect him. I do think that there's going to be 6 quarterbacks taken at this point inside of us in 16 picks, but certainly a chance he dips because he is a polarizing prospect, and it's not as clean and easy to look at him and go, okay, he's that. But really, really, really fun thrower of the football.
Absolutely. He's got an arm that tilts the field in a way that I don't know if anyone else in this class does. Maybe Maye, but I think his arm is probably a little better than Penix's arm. I'm sorry, Caleb's arm.
I would say so. And it's more consistent in where he's putting that ball, especially when he's throwing from that pocket, where he's putting it with arm strength, velocity, anticipation. That's another one to key with him. He doesn't have to see it open. He can throw it open. And then also ball placement, where he will put it on just the right spot.
Yeah, also good pre-snap. Also really good understanding of how to handle things pre-snap, which is why he almost never gets hit. Good footwork in the pocket. I know he's not good on the move, but he's good at sliding away from the pressure. You saw that in the playoff game against Texas. I thought he was really good at showcasing that side of himself in that game. That may have been the best game he played in his career, honestly.
It's another part that comes back to me with Marino, where Marino wasn't mobile, but Marino in the pocket was mobile. Does that make sense? Like in the pocket, he understood how to use your leverage and how you're coming at him, and he'd use your angle against him with that subtle step. And it's a thing that's not all quarterbacks have, or an understanding. Some will panic, some will step into the guy, go the wrong direction. Other guys have that natural feel of just how to kind of dip at the right time and be able to free themselves.
It's just really, it's all about what he does when he's on the move. And in the modern NFL, I do wonder if that kind of thing can work as well as it used to. Like, how would Drew Bledsoe's career played out if he came around 20 years later than he did? I wonder about those things. And I know Penix isn't Bledsoe, but
Oh,
he
there's some,
similarly
yeah.
he similarly cannot make plays on the move.
Yeah, it stands out, man. It is similar to that, and that was Bledsoe too, man. If Bledsoe was going to move to his right, and you're going to have to throw off platform, it's like this is gonna maybe this will hit the mark or not, and that's the big part of him. I mean, you've got to keep. With him, it's a lot about landing zone. He's got to go to a team with a great offensive line. He's got to go with a smart offensive coordinator that's going to understand that we got to get the ball out of his hands. It's not about him sitting back there and doing a ton. Just utilize that arm strength. He can make every throw. I think the other part that jumps into this, Brendan, too, and it's a little bit with the injury front on this, which is that Washington did a very good job over the past 2 years of keeping Michael Penix not just clean, but almost crystal clean through a lot of that period. And NFL teams are not going to be able to do that for him. And you get to that national title game against Michigan, and it's one of the few games throughout this year that he actually had to take some hits and had to kind of get a little bit battered and bruised. And by the end, he's in the medical tent, and it's, get out on the field, buddy. You got to, like, this is going to be a big part of this evaluation. People see in that medical tent, they go, well, see, first time you get hit, you're going to the medical tent. Like, how can we trust in that to hold up on the health standpoint at the NFL level? And that's the part where he's going to have to prove. But if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be a really good player, especially if he can find that right space with the good offensive line.
Yeah, I just cannot do the first round evaluation. I think he has a good chance of going in the first, but I personally wouldn't do it. I have too many questions about the injuries and the ability to make plays off platform. I have him in the second round, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a second round, second round prospect, but I just cannot get to the first round with him.
Understandable. I can see why people would come to that place on the evaluation of it. I've got the first round with him just because of the fact that, again, it clicks into me that if I've got the past that I can think of with a player that it clicks into, this can work with this, where, okay, I've got this player that did it with that player. I mentioned with Bledsoe, like, he couldn't, you're right about if he's 20 years, maybe it's different, but he couldn't throw off platform, still did have a great career through for probably 45, 50,000 yards. So, there's track record of these guys still finding that success, even if they can't do that, but the criticisms are completely valid.
Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $1.99 again. Would you two consider OnlyFans? That carries the same copyright infringing risk, does it not?
OnlyFans. Oh shit. Oh, that's good.
You've seen the Le'Veon Bell thing, right, Brandon?
What's the thing?
You haven't? He started an OnlyFans.
Oh no.
And there's like a bunch of posts. Apparently, he's like, sending people on OnlyFans pictures of his junk and stuff, and like some people actually signed up to it. And yeah, he's doing it. And somehow Ben Roethlisberger is the sanest of the big three players on the Steelers during that era.
It was only a matter of time, I suppose. Let's just hope it's not a new trend now.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, is he doing it because he's broke, or is he doing it because he wants attention?
We hear all those statistics about those players that retire and like 3 years later they're out of money. So it certainly is possible one to the other on that. That's for sure.
All right. So now the quarterback class kind of gears down significantly. I'm not convinced that there's going to be another quarterback that goes in the top 100. I think there will be one more, but I'm not 100% sure of it either. So now things get a lot less appealing, and we're going to have to dig around a little bit to find the right guy. Mm-hmm. But there are some guys here that I like. I'm kind of into some of this personally.
They're very, they've got there's something to them. It's not completely a drop off the cliff.
So the one guy who I think will probably sneak into that third round area is Spencer Rattler. We've been talking about him for about 17 years.
Yeah.
He's been, the next great quarterback for as long as I can remember. It never happened, but now he's finally going to get to the NFL, and hopefully everything clicks into place here. South Carolina last year, spent some time at Oklahoma. There might have been another college in there somewhere. He's been all over the place, it feels like. 23 years old, 6 foot flat, 211 pounds, 31-inch arms, 9 7/8 inch hands. Combine was not very good for him. He ran a 4.95 40, with a bad 10-yard split. His vertical and his broad were okay. His three cone was ugly. 20-yard shuttle was So he didn't seem like much of an athlete, which disappointed me because I think his athleticism was one of the draws to him. Big boards, some have him in the second, some have him in the third, some have him in the fourth. The aggregate has him in the third at number 90 overall. Last 2 years, the production has been okay. It's been consistent. And last year, he did actually piece together a nice season with nothing around him. So there's some nice stuff you can say about Rattler for sure. But at the end of the day, how are you feeling it's going to play in the NFL?
I do have a 3rd round grade on him. I have him as Dak Prescott minus the mobility. So, Dak Prescott's not a great thrower of the football. He's okay. It's got an NFL arm. He can make the throws. That's pretty much what I see with Rattler. The 5 flat 40, the 1.66 10-yard split. That's what you see on tape. There's not an ability to go, I've got the guy here next to me. I need to just get up and get away from that guy now to create space now to keep my eyes down the field. Like he gets a guy next to him and that guy gets his hand on him and brings him down to the ground. Now, some of this is not all his fault in the respect of that you see so much of this on tape because he's under so much duress. There's not another quarterback in the top 5 rounds that will be taken that was under as much pressure as Spencer Rattler was this past year with South Carolina. And that's in the SEC. So there's snaps you see with him where it's like immediate pressure. And he's had to deal with that. And there's something to be said for that in that the resiliency he had to kind of stand tall in that and still carve out a pretty good year. I don't want to let that be overlooked. He's got a pretty lively arm as well, a nice snappy delivery, quick little release to him on that. I don't think it's upwardly like great arm. It's fine. It's good. It's NFL average arm probably at the end of the day where it stands. But I do have a 3rd round grade a little bit because I do think he's just not going to be able to get away from anybody at the NFL level at all. And that's going to be a factor that does hold him back. But he's played a ton of college football, pretty ready-made to go if you do get him in the 3rd round. I think he kind of stands alone in the 3rd round in this class versus other quarterbacks. And there's not really a lot of people near him on either side of that in this particular draft. So he's solid. He's solid out there, but there's not a lot of sizzle there. And, I can't explain everything away on that pressure on some of the stuff with him where it's like, there's some misses on those throws. There's some throws he's another guy. If you have him start to move, it doesn't get talked a lot about, but when you get him starting to move off a platform, a little bit like Michael Penix, the accuracy does start to kind of go into different places.
Yeah, I wrote, I like his footwork in the pocket. I like the fact that he's somebody who does have some experience going through his progressions and reading defenses a little bit. Like if he had just been in Lincoln Riley's offense his whole career, that'd be one thing, but he spent a little bit of time in offenses that are not quite that user-friendly, I guess I'll put it. User-friendly is probably the right term there. He's fundamentally sound. I feel like all that starting experience has helped him out in that regard. But just generally inconsistent, doesn't throw with anticipation the way you would like. The gunslinger stuff, which is understandable because he's on a bad team these last couple years. He's got to, calm that down a little bit in the NFL level. 20 interceptions over the last 2 years. That's not good. But he's trying to be Superman because he's the only player worth a dang on his team. And of course, the off-field issues, which I think are more legitimate and real than the Caleb Williams ones. Like people make a big deal out of Caleb Williams and the off-the-field stuff. I don't think it's a big deal, but with Rattler, I feel like it's a little more legitimate.
There's certainly some questions with him and questions maybe even is he ready to be a leader on all that stuff too? And, that's definitely where the NFL evaluators have to do their due diligence on this and the background work out of him to get that, assurance or lack of assurance. The footwork in the pocket point you made is another good one. I think that he does show off some good ability to he moves from one read to the next when he does go through some reads and he's able to really move himself between his targets well to set and get himself set. And again, mechanically, I think he is very clean as a passer. Not much you could really pick apart there with him. He's another good layer and he is a good layerer of the ball too. He can take a little bit off of it and put it in the right spot. With Xavier Legette, one of the better receivers in this draft, did a good job of being able to use that guy's ability to go up and get the contested catch balls at times in this draft. So there's some stuff to work with him, but a guy that I don't think ends up becoming even, I think, a league starter when it's all said and done in this league. I think the lack of mobility is holding him back, and he's not a good enough, passer. A guy like Brock Purdy at a similar kind of size One thing that's really the underrated skill Brock Purdy brings that you have to always consider is that 1-5. What do you have? 1-5-3 10-yard split, something like that. I mean, that real elite ability to pressure breaks down. I can take 4 steps and get away from that defensive tackle who's breathing down my neck. And if you don't have that, it's tough in the NFL, man, because you're going to be under pressure.
Yeah, I remember not watching the 40 time live. I just saw the number afterwards and I was like, man, part of me kind of hopes that he ran that 40 while holding a bottle that had the, brown paper bag wrapped around it in one hand.
Yeah.
Like that's how it played in my head. I'm like, man, what did this guy do on that 40? How do you do that? That's worse than Mahomes. That's worse than
Well,
Peyton Manning.
and then you start pairing it back because I was taking one last look at him today, Brendan, before the show, and so the previous times I'd look at him before it was before he'd done the combine, but then you start thinking about that 40 at the combine, and you're watching him today, and you're looking at some of the pressure rates, and whereas before a lot of it was again all that well he's under so much pressure, his linemen are losing wins. They're losing their reps really quickly here, but then you start to go, yeah, but he's not ever getting away from anything.
Yeah.
It's all he's either getting rid of the ball or it's all on top of him, and they go, ooh, and that's that thing you always got to do with the testing times where it pairs to what you see actually on the field. And then you get your concrete certainty about what you're seeing.
I do like his arm a little more than you do. I think it's an above average NFL arm. It's not
Hmm.
great, but I do think it's a little bit better. So I would say third round as well, though. I would say I'd bite on the risk in the third round because this is a guy who at one point was expected to be the number one overall pick. And while he never actually got there, the opportunity to get a guy with that kind of potential in the third round, I don't think I can pass it up. Like, even if there's like a 10% chance of it working, it's such a big deal to get somebody that good in the third round. It's immeasurably valuable.
I get it. I get it. And I think once you do leave this area of things, there's a drop off then as we get to the next spots on this. So I totally understand that outlook on it. And I wouldn't shake a stick at going third round either. I've got third round grade on him. So if we took him in the third round, I wouldn't be mad at either.
John, thank you for the 1999. Keep in mind, I don't watch college at all. If I watched college and NFL, I'd never get anything done. But you guys say Penix has good pocket mobility. I think Geno has that. Do you think they're on par with each other? There's a live comparison there. I think that before the season started, we were talking about Penix, and you actually compared him to a left-handed Geno Smith.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've definitely elevated a little bit with Penix from my original Geno Smith outlook on him because of the fact that I think that he might just have a little bit more extra in the tank on the upside than necessarily Geno, but it's still a fair kind of point to put with it. Yes, to answer your question, the stat that stood out from last season, John, in regards to this was, and Brendan helped me out on getting the numbers right on this. The Seattle Seahawks were 28th in pass protection, but I believe we were under 6th in actual sacks taken, right?
Yeah, it was right around there. It was somewhere right around there. He had an incredibly low sack rate for the amount of times he got pressured. Yes.
Right. So and that's a stat to me that there are stats you can look at that go, yeah, there's other things going into this. He's being smart in his hot routes. He's throwing the ball away when the time comes to do so. But there's also a part of you don't have that far of a difference between how bad your pass protection was versus how many sacks you take, unless you also have a quarterback that's doing a great job of moving in the pocket. And it is those subtle movements. For instance, the Pittsburgh game stands out tremendously with me with Geno Smith last year, where Watt was getting really quick pressure and Geno was finding a way with 2 steps to get around the pressure in that particular game over and over and over again. And Penix has that same thing. Yeah, where he can go every which different direction. He's got to go a couple of steps to create that space, but he does so with a little bit of twitch, I would say. It's like, it's not that you'd say is the Lamar Jackson twitch, but there's a little bit of suddenness that makes it really hard on defenders. And he knows how to use, as defender, you're running full speed at the QB. So it's very easy for that QB to kind of flick you one way or the other because you're not coming under control. A lot of times you're bending and twisting and turning and turn sideways, and you're trying to. So if he's just smart about understanding how to react quickly in the moment with a little subtle move, he can get free. And then he's got that quick delivery to then just let it rip off that subtle move like Geno. So it's one step and then ball's right out of his hands. And yeah, he absolutely has that.
Yeah, I think it's a good comp. I think Geno might be a little more willing to tuck and run than Penix will be.
Mhm.
Not saying Penix can't do it, but I don't think that's something that he wants to do very much.
Agreed. I think he
But I,
also
I see the comp.
He also throws on the run better than Penix. I would say with Geno's ability to throw off platform, move into his right, for instance, will be better than Penix. But I think Penix has a little more arm strength. I think Penix has a little more ability to throw at the anticipation at times.
Yeah. There are not very many better arms than Penix. I definitely agree with that. But yeah, thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so now we go down another notch, and I think we're down to guys that are likely to go day 3. I don't think any of these guys are going to go in the first 2 days. Maybe one of them sneaks up in the last home stretch here. We're like, 5 weeks away from the draft. Things happen. Things happen at the last second all the time. So I'm not ruling anything out. The first guy in this day 3 class we're going to look at is the resident small school guy here, Michael Pratt of Tulane. And this is a guy who kind of crept up the boards over the college season, 22 when the season starts, 6'2.5", 217 pounds, 30 3/4 inch arms, 9 1/4 inch hands. Combine numbers were mixed. The vertical was the jumps were good, so he's explosive, but the 3-cone was really slow. I feel like he probably fell down or something and had to like jump back up in the middle of it. I haven't seen it, but the time was really bad, 7.2. The big boards have him in like the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th. Aggregate has him in the early 4th, which I think is probably where he lands. Missed some time last year, but did overall look like an improved player. Has 2,400 yards, 65% completion, 22 touchdowns. Also ran for about 600, 700 yards over the last 2 years. So little bit of dual threat stuff. But how does Michael Pratt fare in the NFL in your eyes?
I actually like him a little bit. I do have the 4th round grade on him. I haven't been able to work out a comp. I don't know if there's really worthy of working on a comp because I think that his future upside is as a league backup. I think that's about as far or high as he can go. He brings some nice little swagger to the position. I see in college where you can just see he's got a confidence the way he goes about his business, a little extra kind of just, sauce that he puts on it. If he does a play action pass, he'll stick the ball in his hip with a little extra kind of trying to hide it. When he throws the ball, he's got a little extra. He does a little extra with his follow through. He's kind of feeling it out there. And I like that about it. He's got a little sense of artistry and what he brings to the position. On his intermediate throws, there's legitimate arm strength. There's legitimate, like some power that comes off that you don't see in some of these later round guys necessarily, or day 3 guys, where he's got some legit arm talent to make those throws on the short and intermediate stuff where it comes out quick. It's got some juice to it. It gets on the receivers accurately. On the deeper throws, it does start to peel off a little bit. The arm strength, it's not quite as good on those kind of tosses. I also think he's got a little bit of an issue at times with the hitches in his throws. He's got to be a guy that gets his feet set under him to get the ball out in the right with that velocity he's trying to deliver with, and he's very cognizant of it. So he's always recorrecting his feet before the throw. And sometimes he's, a lot of quarterbacks will talk to you about when they tell you about teaching feet is that those extra hitches in your step. If it's a 3-step drop, it's 1, 2, 3, get it out. If it's a 5-step drop, 1, 2, 5, get it out. It's not 1, 2, 3, hitch, throw. And with him, there's some of that little hitch, throw part with it where he's just kind of having to correct himself to get it. It makes me wonder a little bit like, well, if I have to get you on that 5 thing and you don't get your feet right, is that ball going to come out with a lot less, juice on it and be an issue at that point? But he's got good arm strength. He's made some really good throws out there. And I like his tape quite a bit because he's being asked to in this offense, Brendan, not just make those little spread offense throws, but he's actually having to push the ball down the football field. And he's got that in him to do it. So fun player, but that's, definitely league backup is probably his upside.
Yeah, I like his pocket footwork. I like the fact that he layers his throws. He's a post-snap information processor. Team captain 3 years in a row, which that's a quality that you don't see with all of these guys. And also a little bit of dual threat stuff. He ran for almost 500 yards in 2022. And I know it's at Tulane. I know that's not going to work in the NFL the same way, but it shows a little something. I think that he drops his eyes when he gets pressured sometimes. He like when he's scrambling, he kind of takes his eyes off downfield and he's just focused on trying to run, which I don't love. And he does hold on to the ball too long occasionally, but overall, I like it. I like it. I'd say bottom of the 3rd or top of the 4th feels about right to me. Like most of it. I don't think he has a great arm. I think it's a good arm, above average arm for sure.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's like he can't make all the throws. He can make most of the throws. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So, like, when I think about, not that this is a one-to-one example at all, but like when I was a little kid, the great example of a small school quarterback that suddenly just vaulted up draft boards at the last second was Jay Cutler. And he
Mhm.
vaulted all the way up to, like, what was it, 6th, 12th overall, I think, way,
Right.
way high.
Mhm.
And that was because they found out that despite the fact that his team was bad and he didn't produce that much, and Vanderbilt was a small school, he had a cannon arm. I don't see that with Pratt. He doesn't have the Jay Cutler arm.
No, there's not, and Cutler was getting Favre comps at the time, so it's not anywhere near that reservoir of arm strength. It's a good arm strength, like you said. I think the arm strength is really more of it shows up on the intermediate throws. You throw that post route, bam, you see it on that. If I've got to throw an out route 20 yards out, it's not going to be quite as good, and the feet have got to be set right, and it's a little bit of the worry for me with him there, but still a good player, interesting prospect, 4th round guy. I'd be fine with it at that point, but. Um, yeah, I don't think he's got a lot to offer as far as future upside goes.
Right. This next guy is a guy who I was really starting to get into, and then tragedy struck. Tragedy befell this guy at the end of the year, and it took me off him a little bit, but not that much. In fact, if somebody sneaks into the top 100 from this group, it'll probably be him, Jordan Travis of Florida State. 24 years old when the season starts. Smaller guy, 6'1", 200 pounds flat, 31 and 3/8 inch arms, 9-inch hands. So you got a little bit of the baby hand thing going on there, just a little bit. The big boards, the Draft Network likes him a lot. They have him in the top 100. PFF and CBS have him in the 4th round. ESPN has him down in the 6th. They're really down on him for some reason. The database has him in the late 4th, early 5th. If he were to get some kind of clean medical readout in the next month, I think he could vault back up into the top 100. I think it's on the table, but as it stands right now, people are justifiably wary. But great production the last 2 years, 6,000 passing yards, 64% completion, 44 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, uses his legs well, ran for over 600 yards over the last 2 years. And that's with him missing a little bit of time at the end of the year because he broke his leg. So how's the Jordan Travis experience going to work in the NFL?
It's got a good potential to work really well. Once we get outside, I think, of that day 2 range of things, this would be my favorite quarterback of day 3, in my opinion, even with the injury that he did sustain. 6'1", 200 pounds. So this is an undersized guy, and you feel that undersizedness when he sets up in the pocket. Just, he's not a big, well-built guy. It's not super slight, but it's just not super well-built either. I think there's some Brock Purdy in here, I think, to him as a player, as far as like kind of looking for a comp type. Really, really good ability to escape out of the pocket. He has an understanding of how to feel pressure, and it's part I really like about him as a quarterback, frankly, is just how he feels things in the pocket, how he feels pressure, how he goes through his progression reads, where he chooses to go with the ball smartly, where he's putting the ball placement. He processes, I think, very well in the pocket, and the escapability is really good. It's maybe not the Lamar Jaden Daniels type, but it's definitely kind of a Russell Wilson type, and that he can kind of almost turn into a running back in the open field with some of his vision and open field moves in space to still go out there and get you some extra yards. A typical quarterback might just go and slide down. It's not him being dangerous with it at that point, right? It's not him being a Lamar. It's just him really smart with his vision and how to go out there and still go get those extra yards. It's, sometimes those guys run open. It's like that man thing where sometimes like, well, I'll suddenly just go sideways, and then I'll get back to vertical up the field. But that turn sideways throws all the defenders off, and you pick up an extra 10, 15 yards kind of getting up the field.
Right.
As a thrower, he's another good layer of the ball thrower in this draft, Brendan. I think he might be maybe one of the best in this draft at putting those trust balls into the exact right places down the field, setting it on those receivers in just the right place to where they can go up and high point it at the right time down the field. And then they're there to make the catch versus putting it 3 yards out of bounds, or putting it to where they've got to go and moss over the top of the guy and pull it back through. He had Johnny Wilson there, a 6'7" wide receiver. And on the Johnny Wilson balls that he would throw him, this guy at 6'7" with those arms and jumping ability, he'd make sure he's giving Johnny the opportunity to go up and truly jump to go pick it. That doesn't come in on a line, that he gives him a little bit of that lollipop throw over the top to let him go get it. Keon Coleman, another guy that they used heavily for the contested catch side. There's some issues with Keanu getting open on his route separations and stuff like that. That's why he's a contested catch guy. But he would, again, throw it to him in just all the right ways to give him an opportunity to make those catches. Or if it's the leverage is on a back shoulder throw, he'll put it there for him and make it easy on Keon on the back shoulder throw. He's throwing guys open at times with it. So I really liked how he plays the position. I think he's got a natural feel for it back there. I think his mobility will translate. I think he's going to recover from this injury. And I think the only real big question with him when I look at it is the arm strength, which I do think is just a bit limited.
Yeah, it's better than I thought it was going to be given how small he is. He looks like he would be one of those smaller quarterbacks with a small arm to go with it, but it's better than I expected. I'll say that. Yeah, mobility, escapability is the name of the game here. He's got a lot of that Fran Tarkenton stuff in him, scrambling around back there. He's good throwing off platform as well. I'm worried that the injury might have an impact on that stuff. Like Dak Prescott, I feel like was a more mobile quarterback before the compound fracture he got. Now, I think that Dak's injury was worse than Jordan Travis injury, but I do wonder how he comes back from that and how he looks in terms of running around like that.
It's hard to predict on these injuries. Every guy is different, Brendan, to your point. So it's a worthy thing of being worried about. And very well and like you say, he could vault up the boards. It very well could be the thing that also does cause him to dip down in the boards a round or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems like the cerebral side of the game isn't great either. He's not great pre-snap or post-snap, I feel like. So it's the stuff between the ears. I think he's got to improve there.
I liked him post-snap. I can't speak on the pre-snap stuff, but I found him to be a guy who stands tall in the pocket and goes through his reads and makes the right decision more often than not. So he's definitely got leans on his mobility a good amount, but I didn't think he bailed on pockets early. I thought he did a pretty good job of going through his stuff. Very good, especially at recognizing blitzes. I thought that stood out to me with him on tape, where he sees it coming and then he attacks it.
Okay, I can dig that. Maybe I was just looking at some different stuff. But I definitely would have had him in the third round. The injury, I think I'm going to wait until the fourth on this one, but I do like him.
Same. That's where I would have put him before. I would have had him in our spot in the third round as a guy to be that Russell Wilson from 2012 you're picking. That would have been the guy this year if he would have been healthy, I think. But being what it is, you've got to dip him down that round. Like you say on that injury front, some guys bounce back, some guys don't. And if you're taking that risk, you got to take that risk in day 3.
Yeah, Russell Wilson with baby hands.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Which admittedly is a little less appealing, but it can still work.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it can work.
All right, so this next guy is the last guy that I feel any real spark for. This last guy here, this is the last guy who I view as potential something in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy could actually be a good NFL player. And in this case, it's unlikely. I get it. Like, it's probably not going to happen. But if it happens, it's going to happen on a very large scale. I'm talking about Joe Milton of the Tennessee Volunteers, 24 years old, which is unusual because he hasn't played that much football despite being an older player. He is the biggest quarterback in this class by a good amount. 6'5", 235 pounds. Like, not even joking. If he doesn't make it at quarterback, you can probably play him at tight end.
Maybe. Hey, he's pretty fast.
Yeah, 33 and 3/8 inch arms, 10 and a quarter inch hands. So the measurables are all really good. He had a 10-foot 1-inch broad jump, which is good for a quarterback. Vertical was 35 inches. Draft Network really likes him. They have him in the 3rd. PFF has him in the 5th. ESPN has him in the 5th. CBS has him undrafted. The mock draft database has him in the 5th round. And in his 1 year of starting, the numbers were pretty good. 20 touchdowns, 5 picks, 300 rushing yards, 2,800 passing yards, 64% completion. But that kind of washes over some of the genuine problems he had with the actual game of football. But how are you choosing to view Joe Milton as we head into this draft?
Another complicated evaluation, Brendan, and not necessarily, I think, a simple and easy one going through, because there is a lot there to like in what he does. A strong arm, an absolute cannon there, and then he can move fast. He had the highest GPS time of any quarterback at the Senior Bowl, so it's functional speed that he can bring out there. There's times that Tennessee would ask him to do 2 progression reads, but he's not getting anything beyond that. And it's a two-side field progression read. So he drop back, he's doing a check me to one side of the field on the outside, then comes back to the other side based off of what he's seeing to one side. You could see him almost kind of snap to the same timing on it over and over again, watching it on tape. His accuracy and timing are very inconsistent. I think his accuracy is especially very inconsistent, and it's all over the board. It's on throws to the flat where it should hit the running back right here in the chest, and he's whistling it up here where the running back's got to catch it up here. Or it's on a slant route where you want him to put the slant route on the receiver's body, and he invariably constantly keeps putting it 3 feet behind him to where the guy's got to reach back to make the catch. He's making the catch much harder than it needs to be. And if I had to kind of summate Joe, I'd be like, that's a little bit of Joe. It's making things much harder than it needs to be. Over processing things almost sometimes, or it's just he's looking down things for a long period of time, late on seeing things, doesn't throw with as much anticipation. I think he wants to see it open all the time. And the fact that he struggled so much with what I would consider one of the more simplified natured offenses in college football at Tennessee. You and I looked at Hendon Hooker coming out of last year's draft operating in the same offense, and watching Hendon Hooker run it versus watching Joe Milton run it. I don't know about you, but I feel like there's a little bit of a keen difference in the way that they're operating the same offense.
Yeah. I mean, he lost a couple receivers to the NFL as well, right? Like Jalen Hyatt went. I think another guy, prolific guy, went as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, this is a player who, as of right now, is bad. Like Joe Milton's a bad quarterback right now. He can barely even play quarterback. I think that's fair to say. I think he completed like 30% of his passes that were more than 10 yards down the field. So that cannon arm, which he does have, is kind of wasted if he can't actually complete a pass with it, isn't it?
Well, and it's like there's this moment in Senior Bowl that really, to me, highlights. Sometimes you get plays, Brendan, that highlight for you like, oh, okay, this is exactly the big problem here with this player, right? It's not always, but there's sometimes you get those moments where it's like, yeah. And he's in the Senior Bowl. I think he threw a couple of interceptions in the Senior Bowl game, which is kind of unusual in itself. But one of the interceptions he's throwing, he's rolling to his right. He's, again, holding the ball for a long period of time. He's got a 7-yard scramble there to take that he turns down and then decides to instead throw a 35-yard throw down the football field late back across his body to the middle of the field, which of course is a cardinal sin for quarterbacks. Do not throw back across your body to the middle of the field late. It's a very specific thing. Okay. It's not just throw back across your body. It's not just throw it late. It's back across your body, late, middle of the field, because those tend to get intercepted because you can't judge it. When you throw those, you think he's opening there, but it's hard to judge those players going sideways to this and make that read in the moment. That's why coaches just say, you just don't do it. You just blindly turn that down. And especially when you have a 7-yard scramble like that on that play to go get, you especially turn it down. And then he's in the moment here, understanding what's at stake, not, understanding how bad an interception looks as you're being evaluated in a place like this, Senior Bowl like that. Again, this matches up to what you see with him on the Tennessee tape. It ain't just something that's happening in the Senior Bowl. It's also something that went back to his time there with Tennessee at times on some of these throws where you're just like, what are you kind of thinking there? Run me through your process, Joe.
Yeah, this is not Detroit, man. This is the Super Bowl. That's the Brett Favre play.
That's right. Oh, exactly.
Across your body late. Across your body late. That's all it is.
That's it. Yeah. Some guy, those guys, the big guns, they think they can get away with it, man. But it's like, sometimes you can. Sometimes you just got to call it a day on that. Live to play another day.
Yeah. I like his escapability. I like his ability to make plays with his legs. Like last year at Tennessee, he had an 80-yard touchdown run, and you have to be a certain foot speed in order to get 80 yards down the field. It's just not going to happen normally for any quarterback unless you have some serious speed. So I see that kind of stuff and I go, that's something you can't teach. And again, I'm not even kidding. Like he could be a tight end in the NFL if he doesn't make it a quarterback. So he's got a backup plan.
He's naturally gifted, man. The size, the arm strength, the mobility. I mean, it's a guy that, again, does have that. It just comes down to playing that position like a blacksmith versus playing it like an artist. And he's sitting there hammering that black thing, ching, ching. He's just, and it's like, dude, just a little bit more of a sense of like, just to play with a little bit more of the style on this, less of everything feeling really, really hard. And with him, everything feels really hard when he's going through what he's doing out there. Again, in an offense that's built for everything to be very simplified to me for the quarterback.
Yeah, but super inaccurate, doesn't throw with anticipation. He locks onto his receiver with his eyes, and it's really easy to read his eyes and go to the ball. Only throws a fastball, doesn't really have any layering of his throws. So there's a ton of talent here. I kind of like him a little bit more than I should because I know how good he's going to be if he ever figures it out. And I acknowledge he probably won't figure it out, but I'd be willing to throw a 4th round pick at him and not feel too bad about it. I know most people wouldn't, but I like him a little bit more than I should. I acknowledge that.
Yeah, he's look, the tools in this kit are unique to find at this late in the draft, right? You're always at this point in the draft looking at some kind of deficiency you're dealing with, and you really don't have anything of a deficiency that you maybe don't feel like you can't possibly correct or fix with him. Like everything's kind of neck up or just cleaning some things up. I do put a 5th round grade because I think he's a long ways to go to get to that stage of things to be functional, but 4th, 5th round, you're taking a guy with true upside that you can't normally find from the quarterback position if you get him.
Right. And I mean, I know it's not Anthony Richardson, but it's kind of the same stuff we said about Anthony Richardson last year. I'm not trying to make a one-to-one comparison, but Anthony Richardson was a guy who didn't produce very much in college. He was a guy with a ton of talent and very little actual production. And look what happened there. I mean, it's already starting to kind of take form there. Now, I don't think that Richardson and Milton are on the same level here, but I do kind of look at that as a template. And I do think maybe people are sleeping on this.
Well, it's true. And that's the part this is the part when you come back to quarterbacks having the multi-years in college of starting, like some of the QBs we have in the draft at the top. That's why part of the reason that they do elevate versus some of these guys, because it's a valid point on your part. That's why you'd like to have that track record of multiple years of production so that you're not sitting there going, well, it could, but we only got that 1 year to work off of, and that's part of why I think that weighs so heavily as some of a bit of a metric on this process. So it's possible, certainly possible, but it's a question mark as much as it's a certainty one way or the other on that one.
Right. All right. So now we're getting down into like the flyers, the guys who are just kind of dangling around here. I don't even know if they're going to get drafted. They might not. They might play in the NFL. They might never play in the NFL. Like it could go a few different ways with these guys, but I did want to try to find something that was at least a little bit exciting. So let's take a look at some of these super sleepers, starting with the new wave Jimmy Garoppolo 2.0. He's got the handsomeness factor, at least. He's got that going for him. Sam Hartman of Notre Dame.
Yeah, Sam Hartman. Love Sam Hartman. Love him.
Yeah, if that's got to help you in the draft, right? That's got to help your draft stock at least a little bit.
It can't hurt, right?
They pulled in all the female fans with the Taylor Swift thing. Now they got to lock him in with the right quarterback.
Just need some more female owners to be like, get me that one. I don't care where you got to pick him.
All right. So Notre Dame, 25 years old, oldest QB in this class, I think. 6'1", 211 pounds, 31 3/8 inch arms, 9 3/4 inch hands. Ran a 4.8 40, 1.63 10-yard split, vertical 28.5, broad jump 9'1". Combine in general was not particularly good. He just kind of went through the motions. Walter Football really likes him. They have him in the 4th round. I don't get it. ESPN has him in the 6th, and PFF and CBS have him going undrafted. The database has him in the late 5th, early 6th. Last 2 years, pretty decent production. I think he missed some time in 2023. His numbers fell off pretty dramatically in terms of bulk, but in terms of like efficiency, it was about the same. So do you see anything with Sam Hartman that you like?
He's one of the more back end of these prospects I'd probably be more out on than anything else. He processes pretty well in the pocket. He's got a pretty compact delivery. But, you get to the bottom line on him for me really quickly, really fast, which is that he's an undersized guy who doesn't offer very much mobility, and he has a far below arm strength, and he's inaccurate. You put all of those things together for me in watching the tape with him, and I go, yeah, no, like not even in the 7th round. I see him as a UDFA guy myself. He didn't have a good Senior Bowl, didn't do much at the combine. The tape is not good. I mean, there's some throws that like he misses that are pretty rudimentary throws that he just doesn't land. I mean, I almost would say it's a layup. And I just, for a guy that doesn't have anything you're bringing at that point, I mean, give me something, give me great mobility. You can't throw anywhere, but at least give me that. And he doesn't even offer that. So I was very disheartened watching Sam Hartman's tape.
Yeah, I had a couple of okay things. I think his decision making's pretty good. His deep ball's all right. He's got a nice deep ball. Um, Effective when off script, I think. But like you said, inaccurate, bad fundamentals lead to turnovers, stares down his receivers, and you can just follow his eyes and you're gonna get a chance at the ball. He doesn't have a fastball. He's got no speed on. He's Jamie Moyer out there, just trying
Hmm.
to get by, living on the corners,
Yeah.
throwing that 83-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah. Which, hey, that's fine if you're going to be accurate then. Then put it on the spot or anticipate, throw it early, get it early out to the guy, like, but those don't come on the other side of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And he's small too. He's on the
Yeah.
smaller side of things, so even that stuff isn't great. So seventh round slash UDFA to me. I don't know why you'd want to spend a pick on him, really. I guess so. I guess I'd lean UDFA, but seventh round, I can kind of see it. I do think he's a good decision maker. I'll say that. I think his fundamentals betray him a little bit in that regard and make him look worse than he is. But there isn't much to say about this one.
There's not. And I do feel like at 25 years old, he should be much further along, both in the fundamentals aspect and how he processes in the pocket.
Mhm. All right. Next up, we have a guy who's been around for a hot minute, too. He's been bouncing around this league for a while, and he's finally declaring it's Keaton Slovis. Most recently, a BYU, 23 years old, 6 foot 2.5, 223 pounds, 31 and 1/8 inch arms, 9 and 7/8 inch hands. Actually, was the only quarterback who tested at the combine who had a decent 40 time, 4.55 with a 1.58. The only big board I found that has him getting drafted is ESPN. They have him in the 7th. PFF, CBS, and the database all have him undrafted. His last 2 years have been very unproductive. He's completed less than 58% of his passes, 22 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, about 4,000 yards. Doesn't really have any running stats either. His good seasons are ancient history at this point. He had good seasons at, I want to say, USC. It was
Yeah.
USC, right?
Yeah. He's one of the weirdest quarterbacks you'll ever find that had his best play was when he started his college career versus where he's ended up at. He's gotten worse
Yeah.
over time rather than better.
All right. So Benjamin Button here. What do you think about him in the
Yeah, the
NFL?
Benjamin Button of the college football. I think you accurately captured pretty much what you're dealing with him here, which is the guy's not progressed. And his best football was when he walked in the door. If that's not a warning sign, I don't know what it is as far as to, turn away from it. 23 interceptions over the past 3 years, and that's while being injured a lot. What the hell? His decision making is all over the place. He's got a snappy release, average arm strength, poor accuracy. He's got some escapability out of the pocket. He's quick enough to avoid pass rushers. You see that with his 1.58, 10-yard split, 44.55 40. He's one of the few guys that ran the 40 at the combine and actually ran well at 223. So he does give you that a little bit, which we start to go, okay, well, I got a little bit of a, get up and get away. He is comfortable also throwing on the run, just not always accurate throwing on the run. It's all over the place. And if I have to just put him down on that, Brendan, I'd say like lack of development and just kind of all over the place a little bit. There's not some stuff here to work with, but there's a lot of warts all over this particular prospect as far as issues to clean up, issues you're not sure if you can clean up. Problems with the accuracy, especially, man, that doesn't tend to improve to me, the accuracy stuff when it's in the state it is right now. And that's a big part, I think, where the interceptions along with decision-making come from. And yeah, I'm a UDFA on Keaton, so it was still even with that.
Yeah, let's see. I do think he uses his eyes well. He's good at looking off defenders with his eyes, which a lot of these guys that we looked at are not so good at. So I did appreciate that. Fits the ball into tight windows, although with that comes a lot of turnover. So I don't know if that's a good thing, right? It's like, yeah,
Right.
you can do it, but can you do it well? I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. Just you don't have that kind of arm, bro.
Yeah. But yeah, too many turnovers, not a consistently good arm, injuries. He's again gotten worse with each passing year. So hard to stand by him as very much. Seventh rounder UDFA for me, somewhere in that range. I don't see too much here. Little more interesting than Sam Hartman, I guess, but
Yeah.
that's about all I can say.
He's got better arm strength and a snappier delivery than Sam. I mean, it does stand out. And I think you mentioned how he looks off. He's got a comfortability in how much he's played. Like we're talking about with Sam, a little more ability to go through progression reads, a little more ability to play the position where you'd like to see for a guy that's had a lot of time in college. But the issues are also very many.
All right. Next, small time prospect guy that we're trying to find a diamond in the rough on would be Austin Reed of Western Kentucky. Going to be 24 when the season starts. 6'1.5", 220, 30 and an eighth inch arms, 9 and 7/8 inch hands. Ran a 4.8, 240, 167, 10-yard split. We don't really like that. PFF likes him a lot, though. They have him in the 5th. ESPN has him in the 7th. And the mock draft database has him barely by the skin of his teeth going undrafted. A lot of production the last 2 years. 8,000 passing yards, 70 passing touchdowns, 22 interceptions. So he put up some numbers, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to put up numbers in the NFL now, does it?
It doesn't. I think I like him a little more than the last two guys we've talked about. I would put him as a 7th round graded guy, real gutsy quarterback who reacts really well to chaos. If something happens and falls apart around him to his side, he bam the balls out into a spot and completed. And he's got his escape route always planned, if that makes sense, Brendan. And not just, in how he scrambles, but the guy he intends to go with. If something goes wrong here, I'll go there. He's Malachi Corley's quarterback, the kid that is a guy the Hawks have bet with, wide receiver. And it's fun to watch him work out there with Corley because he is such a gutsy guy in some of his throws back there. Pretty snappy delivery. He can deliver with some power on short and intermediate passes. Definitely doesn't have the big arm for all the NFL throws. Part of why, he's where he is here. I think he also had a weird habit of falling on his back foot on many of his throws, where mechanically he's just not stepping always into it. He gets into this kind of lazy falling back thing, which then kind of affects where the ball is going and how it's coming out. Just okay mobility. It's not as bad as the 4.82. He's not complete statue. He can move a little bit, but obviously there's not going to be any that really translates to the NFL level. I could see a guy that could maybe find an upside with some backup as the NFL level, but the 7th round would be as good as I'd want to go on that. And if there's a guys like a 4th running back that we could get that could be legitimate and helping us out in return game, or be a guy to take some carries, for instance, if you're sitting there with that. If a Kenny McIntosh was there versus an Austin Reed, I would go with a McIntosh type versus that. But I like him a little more than the other two guys, just by a smidge.
Yeah, I wasn't really feeling this one. He's got no downfield arm strength. I don't like the arm. Mm-hmm. And he also threw screens at a Bo Nix-like rate. It's like 30% of his throws are behind the line of scrimmage. And yet his completion percentage is still pretty bad. It's like over the last 2 years combined, it's 63%. For comparison, Bo Nix last year with the same screen rate was about 77%. So I'm like, okay, so you're not accurate either. You've got an awkward release, too many turnovers for a guy who throws that many screens. I like his pocket presence. I like his decision making. I think that he's pretty good at extending the play with his legs. But I don't know. He's like a gunslinger Brock Purdy to me, and I wasn't feeling it. So I think he's a UDFA. Personally.
Yeah, I could see it playing out that way. And to your point on that, he's got to have his feet set to be able to throw his passes accurately, and to get, he's one of those guys that needs everything set to get the arm strength out right. So, and that's hard to do always at the NFL level. Sometimes you need to just have kind of the feet partially set and be able to let it rip. So, really just like the way that when stuff started to happen around him suddenly, he could instantaneously react to it and make a good decision out of that. But I think that that's all very fair.
Okay, we're getting down to the home stretch here. We got a couple more guys. This first one, very small school. Carter Bradley of South Alabama. 24 years old, 6'2", 211 pounds, 31 3/4 inch arms, 9 3/4 inch hands. Ran a 4.940, I think, at his pro day because he was not at the combine. PFF and ESPN have him in the 7th round. CBS has him undrafted, as does the database. Last 2 years, moderately decent production for South Alabama, about 6,000 yards, 66% completion, something like 45 touchdowns, 19 interceptions. Not bad. But do you think anything of Carter Bradley?
Don't have any film I've seen on him on that one. It's small school. Just some of these guys, there's not any tape to really be found.
Right. Now, I mean, there isn't film. There's one guy in the stands holding the
Yes,
camcorder up.
with a
That's all it is.
1995 camcorder too, with a
Yeah.
VHS.
So what I have is that he's surprisingly athletic. I know the 40 times not good, but he's a little more athletic than you would think. Moves around in the pocket well. I think he does have a nice arm. I think his arm is better than you would expect for a South Alabama quarterback. He can make a decent number of throws with zip too. He can put zip on the ball. He's accurate on script and accurate off script. And I think he's got a pretty good pre-snap understanding. The issues I had were he needs to learn how to layer his throws. Everything's kind of a fastball right now. Bad decision making happens occasionally, leading to turnovers. And his deep ball does kind of do the I don't know, Desmond Ritter thing where I feel like it hangs in the air and lets the defenders catch up to it. Like he can throw the deep ball, but that ball just kind of lingers up there a little too long, and a defender can recover in time to get back to it. So I actually kind of liked Carter Bradley. I would not even mind like a 6th round pick here. I think is my value. I think he's mostly got fixable problems. I know it's not likely to be fixed, but he's got qualities that you can't find in most of these small school guys.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. So that would be kind of my little pet project, I guess. And yeah, we got one more guy on my list here, and then if you've got anything else you want to toss out there, we'll have time for that. Devin Leary of Kentucky, formerly I think he was North Carolina State before I think before Maye was there, he was at North Carolina State, if I remember correctly. 24, 6'1", 215 pounds, 30 and 7/8 inch arms, 9.5 inch hands. ESPN really likes him. They're the only big board that has him getting drafted. They actually have him in the 5th. Over the last 2 years, he's been reasonably productive, although his completion percentage fell off a cliff last year. And overall, his play actually fell off a cliff. He missed a lot of 2022. So if you go back to 2021, that's when he actually was playing at a really high level. But where do you sit now with Devin Leary?
He's got some interesting parts to his games. 6'1", 215, so it's not a big guy. Another one of these guys just sometimes the quarterbacks just seem like they're getting smaller at times. I like his lower half. Front foot's always point out towards the target, stepping into his throws. I think he's a good layer thrower. He's a good thrower of knowing what throws are called upon to throw in the right moments, to where you can, he just instantly makes the right decision on those kind of throws where some quarterbacks never, some just don't know it, or like we talked about Milton, it's all fastball city, so to speak. I think he's got a release that's pretty quick on shorter throws. I think the longer the throws get, it's a little bit of that thing we talked about before with one of the other prospects, where it's not an elongated delivery, but it's that sort of like the delivery takes a little bit more longer for the ball to get out. Like he's having to, real build up those kind of throws to get it down the field. And it does lose steam the further you got to have him push the ball down the field. So you come back to that 6'1", 250. Does he just have the natural goods to really push the ball? He throws off platform with good pop and accuracy moving to his right. He is not an anticipatory thrower. He really needs to see it to throw it. I do see maybe a potential league backup here with a guy in the 7th round you might pick, but I honestly, at the end of the day, don't see a lot of electricity in his arm or his ability to move enough as a guy being kind of undersized, because he also doesn't give you the size pass part of it. So there's some parts of it that are okay with him, but he's held down by, I think, the sum of the total parts here a little bit.
Yeah, I like his layering of throws. I think he layers his throws pretty well. He was a team captain at both teams that he was on, so he's a leader. He's got leadership qualities. I think he puts decent zip on the ball, especially for a guy in this area of the draft. But when you ask him to like throw to the sideline or throw deep, he loses all his accuracy.
Yeah.
He's got no ability to fit it in down the field. His release looks weird to me. It's a little longer than you want it to be. And he's mostly a pre-snap merchant. He makes reads pre-snap, and then he just obeys what he saw pre-snap with whatever he does post-snap. So he's not really reading the defense live. He's reading it pre-snap. Kind of like the Bo Nix thing, which I don't love. But a lot of things to work through. I'd say 7th round. I don't think he's undraftable. I don't think he's I don't think we can completely ignore what he did in 2021, which was genuinely really good. But I would say 7th round pick at this point.
Yeah, I would put him in a draftable race because there are some good stuff to work with. I think as well, it's not an improvisational guy. He's got to go to the place like if the 49ers were to look to target this kind of guy, that could maybe work because you got to just go to a very much on structure, in structure kind of offense to get the most out of him. But there is some arm talent here, even if I don't love the arm strength and pushing the ball down the field. There is some legitimate arm strength, especially with some of the snappiness of his delivery and the cleanness, I think, of some of his mechanics. I'm with you on the elongated arm delivery a little bit. It's
Yeah.
it's not really a windup. It's again, that thing where just the arm seems to slow down and take forever to get through the zone to release the ball when they're trying to really push the ball down the field.
Mhm. And that's all I had for quarterbacks in this draft. Did you have anything else that you were looking at?
I just had Jake Plummer on my list, 6'5", 215, so a little bit more legitimate size. Of course, son of former quarterback in the NFL out of the Broncos, Jake the Snake Plummer. So a guy that was, had a pretty good pro career, functional quarterback without any wow factor. Arm action, another guy with arm action that's really slow, not elongated again, just kind of slow arm action on the way where it's like, man, it takes. You're like, man, these defenders are going to jump on this thing with as long as this thing's like somebody hits the slow motion button when you go through your windup. He's not a dynamic athlete at all. He has a weird habit of dirting short throws over the middle just randomly. Most of his other throws, intermediate throws, are pretty accurate where he's on it. That was a big hallmark of his dad. His dad didn't have a big arm, but he could be really accurate where he put the ball and put it in the right spot. Real catchable pass. He's got some of that to him. Real confident back foot thrower. In fact, that's kind of his patented move for him is that he's got back foot dimes where he can kind of fall back and, kind of throw it back like he was, falling away a little bit like a fall away jumper, but he does it comfortably where a lot of quarterbacks do it from a bad habit standpoint. He's doing it more purposeful. Fringe league backup. I worry about the arm strength stuff a little bit. I worry about the accuracy stuff as well. And then he's not going to really have the mobility. So he's got to be good in those other areas. And I don't think he is. So it's a very much fringy on the 7th round for me.
Okay, so I think I'm aware of Plummer as well. I heard his name a lot during the season, but I haven't really scouted him yet. So
You ain't
7th
missing
round
much.
or UDFA for you?
Yeah. You're not missing much on it. All these guys are talking about very, not even like, well, they'll be league backups. Like, fringe league backups, probably.
I mean, anybody can be a league backup. Are you a good league backup is the question,
Right.
right? Like I could be a
Sure.
league backup, but I'm still not going to be able to do anything.
That's right. Call me the emergency quarterback.
Not even. I'm pretty sure I think that Michael Dixon could be a better quarterback than I would be. I'm pretty sure about that.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. We haven't seen him throw. Maybe he's got a hose.
All right. So I think that'll do it for the show tonight, everybody. Thank you for coming out. We spent about 2 hours grinding on these quarterbacks. It's a nice class. It's a fun class.
Top heavy, but definitely still a strong class of quarterbacks nonetheless.
And we will do this again in, I think, a week. I'm not sure what position we're going to tackle next. It'll be a surprise, I guess, for you all. But we will be doing more draft stuff. That's where we are right now. There's not a lot else going on other than just prepping for the draft. So thank you, everybody, for coming out. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Brandon, thank you for coming out and doing this with me today.
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and things are heating up, guys. We have a really good idea of what the team's going to look like in 2024. We have a really good idea of the way things are coming together. Real quick here, the Snail, thank you for the $2. Number 7, Washington State advances. Go Cougs.
Go
I did
Cougs.
hear about that. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, I saw Oregon advanced as well against South Carolina, and now the Cougars advanced. So final year of the Pac-12, we're going to have a little bit of second round representation.
How brutal on Gonzaga if Cougs went and won the national title after all these years with the Gonzaga sitting there knocking on the door.
They're not going to do that. Let's not go too crazy here.
You never know, man. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Right. Everybody buckle down and get ready for this draft. Everybody get ready for this prospect evaluation season. That's what it's all about. And as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.